Hey guys, welcome to part 5 of What If Naruto Was Adopted by Iruka. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 17. Trust. The familiar sound of droplets falling steadily into a stagnant pool was oddly comforting. The water felt cool and welcoming this time, and the surrounding dimness was a blessing of its own. But it couldn't last, Naruto knew. His heavy eyelids eased open to view the darkness far above, and after a moment he sat up slowly. Sorry, he sighed, rubbing at the back of his neck. His voice echoed around the chamber, and it was met with a growl from beyond the gate. An apology isn't going to fix this, mortal, the Kyuubi rumbled, resting its head on its massive forepaws. We're both about to die. Yeah, I know. But I am sorry that I had to take you with me, it's not really fair. Large crimson eyes blinked at him, and after a few seconds the fox tilted its head to the side curiously. What does it matter to you? The Biju have become mere weapons of war, made so by shinobi like you. I have been manipulated and sealed by more humans than I care to remember, all in the name of greed. Would you knock that off already? Naruto sighed, pushing himself up and looking around before wading to the gate. I've been telling you for months that I just want to work with you. Can't you at least act like my friend instead of my tool, or whatever? Friend. The Kyuubi mused, swishing its many tails around and chuckling mirthlessly. My presence within you has made your life miserable. I'm a tailed beast. Kid, what makes you think you can befriend the greatest power of this world? Naruto sighed again, sinking back to sit in the shallow water and pulling his knees to his chest. He didn't say anything in response, only staring into the prison past the fox. The Kyuubi made a frustrated noise, rolling its eyes before continuing. What? I don't want to die, I guess. Naruto paused and let out a weak laugh, shivering slightly. I mean, if I had to make the decision again I would have done the same thing. I'm glad Hinata-chan is safe, but you heard her, didn't you? The fox's voice was quiet, though it still nearly shook the bars in front of Naruto. The boy nodded slowly, fidgeting with his sleeves and still looking at nothing. He heard the Kyuubi sigh, but didn't see its eyes close solemnly. You've got a lot to learn. Not that there's any time for that now. What do you mean? Naruto asked, lifting his gaze. The Kyuubi shifted its weight, uncrossing its paws and settling its head down between them, its face as close to the ground and Naruto as it could be with the barrier in between them. It was an unnerving sight, seeing the fox looming like that, but it also seemed odd for the beast. Kid, why did you save Hinata? Naruto blinked at him a few more times, briefly distracted at hearing the Kyuubi use her name. Because she would have been killed if I hadn't, he responded assuredly. I couldn't have let her die if there was something I could do about it. The Kyuubi shook its head, and the floor trembled with the motion. That's not what I meant, fool. You saved her because you possess the same feelings. Naruto didn't blush as expected. Instead he looked down, nodding after a moment of silence. But you didn't even think about her, did you? You acted selfishly. What? Naruto blurted out, looking up at him incredulously. I protected her. How is that selfish? Use your damn brain, the Kyuubi growled, baring its teeth. You're about to be dead. Do you understand what that means? You'll be gone. Forever. And guess what? He paused for emphasis, allowing the boy time to visibly pale. She's still alive, and will have to live with the knowledge that you died protecting her, for the rest of her days. Naruto became very still after that, staring up into one of the Kyuubi's massive eyes. But tears began to burn at the corners of his eyes as he tried to fight off the fox's explanation. But I couldn't. He choked, squeezing his knees to his chest. If Naruto hadn't known any better, he would have sworn that the Kyuubi's eyes softened, even if only a little. Kid, sometimes being the one who lives is being the one who loses the most. Just because you possess the strength to act, it doesn't mean that you always should. The words struck Naruto like a physical blow, and had he been standing he might have stumbled back. There was only silence after that, and it wasn't until several minutes later that Naruto realized that it was getting darker. He began, wiping tears from his eyes. I don't want to die. The Kyuubi raised an eyebrow. His eyes seemed brighter in the increasing gloom. Nobody wants to die, but you made this decision yourself. But I'm not dead yet, Naruto said fervently, glaring up at the fox. As long as I'm alive, even just in here, I want to fight to keep it that way. I don't want to leave Hinata and Sasuke like that. Isn't there anything that we can do? It was the Kyuubi's turn to blink, and the room flickered completely dark for a moment. The boy's expression was anguished and pleading, but it was mixed with his usual determination and fiery passion. It seemed the fox's words had banished his previous resignation. Not going to give up, Naruto shook his head, and the Kyuubi couldn't help but let out a wry chuckle. That sounds more like you, Uzumaki Naruto. He was answered by a fierce grin from the blonde, something he returned in kind. The Kyuubi's smile looked more like a snarl, but Naruto was in tune enough with the Biju that he understood the intent. I can try one thing, but it's got a slim chance of working. Even if you manage to live, there will be repercussions. If I've only got one option, do they really matter? The Kyuubi lifted its head and shrugged, flexing its claws in thought. I suppose not, but you ought to be aware of them. The giant fox stood then, slowly arching and stretching back, dragging its claws across the stone floor with the action. He acted as if he had all the time in the world, and Naruto was starting to get apprehensive about how long they really had left. For one, you need to trust me. And I don't mean casual trust that you might afford an acquaintance. You need to put your full faith forward, because otherwise I won't be able to get out. Out. Naruto blurted out before he could stop himself. Shukaku's maddened cheers came back to him then, and he swallowed nervously. I'm out. I'm out. You want me to let you out? Can you even do that? Theoretically, yes. Shukaku's seal is different than this one, but if I flood your body with enough of my chakra and you allow me to take over, it could work. But, the Kyuubi continued, straightening and looking down at Naruto again, there will be irreversible effects from forcing so much of my chakra into you, if you even survive it. I'll have to regenerate some of your organs, your left arm, and most of the right side of your body. Mending small injuries is barely noticeable in the grand scheme of things, but replicating that many cells in such a small period of time will have a measurable consequence. You will lose years of your life by doing this, and there will be scars that I cannot remove. I've never done something like this, nor have I heard of it being done, so that is as far as I can assure you. Naruto stared up at the fox for a time, his grave features almost entirely hidden in the gathering darkness. All right, I'll trust you, he said finally, then let out a sudden bark of laughter, eliciting another quirked eyebrow from the Kyuubi. You know, you've been trapped inside of me for 12 years and I never asked your name. I've just been calling you Kyuubi, or the fox, all this time. The Ikibi's name is Shukaku, right? What's yours? Naruto couldn't see the corner of the fox's lips tug into a small smirk, but he heard the deep, rumbling chuckle a moment later. Mortals don't ask after our names, and neither do we give them lightly. Consider it a privilege that I will share it with you, even if it is moments from your likely death. Naruto rolled his eyes as he stepped forward to the center of the gate, waiting in the short time he had left. My name is Kurama, the Kyuubi no Kitsune. You humans have had many names for me, Bakitsune, Kyuubi no Yuko. Now that you know my true name, should you survive I expect proper respect from you, mortal. Naruto smirked, offering a bow that was only half serious. It was an honor working with you, Kurama-sama. The Kyuubi growled at his obvious insolence, but Naruto continued as he straightened, softening the sarcasm a bit. Really though, thank you, Kurama, and when we live through this, can you quit calling me kid and mortal, too? You've at least known my name this whole time. Kurama snorted before easing up on his hind legs, reaching forward and placing his claws between the gates just behind the seal. The bars groaned as the enormous force began to push them apart, and a few growls escaped the fox before the barest slit cracked open between them. As you wish, kid. Naruto placed his hands on the outside of the gigantic doors, trying to push them apart with all of his might. He barely even heard Kurama, too focused on providing what little aid he could. Red-orange chakra rose up out of the ground, bringing light to the chamber once again. Energy was flowing off of the Kyuubi's colossal form, pouring into the water and leaking from between the bars in the gate. It swirled and coalesced around Naruto, and for a while he wondered why they were trying to pry the gate open in the first place. But then Kurama snarled, taking an earth-shattering step forward and heaving at the gate with all of his might. The Kyuubi's muscles appeared to tear as the barrier gave way another fraction of a centimeter, but it was enough. The last thing Naruto saw was the bright light of a proverbial tidal wave of chakra before he was falling through cold darkness. Kurama's voice followed him down, the faintest words echoing in the back of his mind. See you on the other side, Naruto. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. An explosion shook the walls of the infirmary, rousing Hinata from her unconscious state. The back of her head throbbed and she felt dizzy as she opened her eyes. Waking up in a sterilized environment for the second time in a month proved unnerving, but that concern wasn't foremost in her mind. The girl's brow knitted as she tried to remember the dream she had been having. Rather, the horrible nightmare. Another detonation nearby snapped her out of her reverie, and cruel reality came crashing back. Naruto. She breathed, fresh tears already forming in her eyes. Why? Because he cared for you. Hinata sat up at the sound of Neji's voice, trying to force the swelling tide of emotions back. The village was under attack, and she had already acted selfishly once. Unfortunately, logic was much more difficult to employ than she would have hoped. It felt like her very soul ached. She ignored her cousin, swinging her legs off the side of the bed. Her expression was blank, vacant, but grimly set to do her duty as a leaf ninja. Not to mention, they killed him. Hiyashi-sama instructed me not to let you leave here, Neji stated quietly, setting himself in front of the only door as Hinata approached to leave. His right arm was heavily bandaged and held up by a sling, and most of his torso was wrapped as well. He would not have harm come to Neji-Nisan, Hinata interrupted in a calm, distant voice. I was disowned, and I am no longer the Hyuga heiress. My fate is my own to decide, and I will help our village however I may. Stand aside, or I will make you. In that moment, as her eyes met Neji's, he had no doubt that she could have followed through with her threat, even if he had been uninjured. He stared at her for a moment before bowing and stepping aside, keeping his head lowered long after she had gone. The infirmary had been set up as an attached building on the outer wall of the arena, likely as a temporary facility for the exam. Hinata leapt onto the stone exterior of the amphitheater, sprinting up the side and activating her Byakugan as she reached the top. She willed herself not to look towards where she knew Naruto's body was, focusing instead on the three familiar forms fighting below. Shukaku had moved from the area. She could see him dancing in glee as he wrought havoc further into the city. She set her jaw and jumped, sliding down the length of the wall before rushing to rejoin her broken team. Sasuke spotted Hinata first after tearing viciously through an enemy shinobi's throat with his wakizashi. Even from that distance he could see her empty eyes, and the sight caused him to choke out a curse. He'd been allowed only a second to register Naruto's death before they were attacked again, forcing his attention elsewhere. Haku and Kakashi seemed entirely unaffected, but he knew all too well how adept the older shinobi were at hiding their emotions. Hinata. Behind, Kakashi barked, but he stopped as the pair of Odo nin approaching behind Hinata fell. She hadn't broken her stride, and her features remained unchanged even as two kunai left her hand, thrown backwards. A breath later they were buried to the hilt in one of each of the oncoming ninja's eyes. You. Kakashi had only a few seconds to watch Hinata before he was engaged in combat once again, but in that short time he had observed his student becoming something he had never wanted to see. Damn it! Damn it! Kaden. Flame contagion. Sasuke snarled, facing down a group of approaching shinobi. A blast of fire shot from his palm and crashed into the leading ninja. The man screamed and fell writhing to the ground, and though his allies ignored their fallen comrade, the hungry flames wouldn't allow them to pass. Sparks erupted from the burning corpse, striking those nearby and spreading further. Before the rest had even realized what was happening, the jutsu had consumed them all. The last of the anguished cries faded as Sasuke released the technique, and after the orange glow had diminished, all that remained were 12 unrecognizable, ashen forms. Hokage. Ethereal Senbon. Hinata was battling her own share of adversaries on Kakashi's other side, but they were falling one by one as needles of chakra struck their vital points with unerring precision. A dozen sound ninjas fell to her ability before another voice was heard, just behind Kakashi. Haijutsu. Ice Graveyard. The last group, a squadron of sand shinobi, was cautiously approaching after witnessing the others perish. As they came near, the ground underfoot turned from hard dirt to ice, and those that didn't fall slid across the slick surface. In seconds the ice latched onto its victims, rooting them as the jutsu crept up their limbs. They panicked and tried to flee, but it was futile. After a short time all that remained were frozen statues, which shattered a moment later following a hand seal from Haku. The war-torn arena floor quieted after Kakashi dispatched the few remaining enemies. He landed lightly back in position, his back facing the other three in a manji formation. His eyes traveled warily around before he straightened, tugging his forehead protector back down over his left eye. Hinata. Status. Sections A, B, C, and E are clear. Team Guy and several Chunin are eliminating the last threats in Section D. Anbu have surrounded the barrier on the roof. The Hokage is still fighting inside. Kakashi muttered a curse but nodded, purposefully avoiding looking towards Naruto. The others were doing the same, though now that their lives weren't in immediate danger, reality was coming back for a hard hit. Haku, go release all of the villagers you can from the genjutsu and escort them to safety. You two come with me, we need to join the main forces and. Kakashi trailed off as a chill ran down his spine. What? All eyes turned finally to the scene they had been avoiding, to Naruto's corpse that still hung from Shukaku's spikes. Vermilion chakra was oozing from his wounds and pooling below, beginning to move in a sluggish circle as it rose gradually around him. Hinata took in a sharp, choking breath before taking several hurried steps forward, but Kakashi's hand fell heavy on her shoulder. Stop, he said in a low, harsh tone. Despite herself, Hinata froze, the urgency in her teacher's voice piercing through her overwhelming anxiety. This chakra feels different from the kind Naruto uses. It's almost like it was on that day. The ground began to tremble, and the thickening air filled with a low, resonating hum. More chakra was pouring from Naruto, becoming brighter by the second. It was leaking out of his skin now, enveloping him in a dense shroud of energy. The rotating chakra began to accelerate, spiraling higher and higher around him with every passing moment until it disappeared from sight. Shukaku's spikes disintegrated in the tempest, leaving Naruto suspended in the middle of the whirlwind of power. Wind picked up along with it, sending hurricane gales in every direction. Naruto-kun! Hinata yelled, shielding her eyes as debris scattered all around. Even with her Byakugan she could hardly see through the mass of chakra, but just before it became too dense to pierce she saw Naruto's eyes snap open, and her blood froze in her veins. Staring back at her was a pair of wide, alien eyes, devoid of anything but a blinding, bloodthirsty red light that seemed to burn straight to her soul. She let out a strangled sob and fell to her knees, shaking. Get back! Kakashi yelled, already lifting Hinata and turning to sprint away from Naruto. It's the Kyuubi. The Kyuubi. It was exactly the same as 12 years ago, it was the same unfathomable, malevolent chakra of the nine-tailed fox. They had almost made it to the far wall of the arena when the ground rippled beneath their feet. A deafening thunderclap pierced through the howling wind, and the air began to crackle as the incredible chakra reached its peak. Hinata's eyes were locked on the column of red-orange light, trying desperately to see through it with her Byakugan despite being terrified of what she might see. Kakashi pressed on, leading them up the wall and only stopping once he reached the top. Everything became very still a moment later. The dust and rubble settled to the ground, the wind died down, and the earth ceased its shaking. Shukaku's rampage could be heard once again, as well as the shouts and explosions from nearby battles. Kakashi turned, still holding Hinata, and both Haku and Sasuke followed his gaze back to the harsh beam of light, back to where Naruto should have been. The pillar of chakra was collapsing, but instead of falling back into itself it was expanding, writhing and distorting rapidly. At first it appeared to be a formless mass of energy, but once it reached the height of the outer wall its true shape became clear. Ancestors preserve us, Kakashi whispered, his eye wide as 9 distinct tails stretched towards the sky. The body of chakra was elongating now, stretching opposite the tails to form the head and torso of a giant fox. 4 sets of claws touched down on what remained of the arena floor. Up until that point, the entire being had been wrought of pure, red chakra, but as the fox's silhouette completed, the power began to flow away. The liquid energy melted off to reveal the last thing any citizen of Konoha would ever want to see. Kyuubi no Kitsune. Sasuke had been the one to voice in awe what they all had been dreading to recognize. The beast's back reached Shukaku's standing height, towering above the amphitheater. Its head was the closest to them, and though it was at least a dozen meters above, they could clearly see its eyes easing open. 2 spheres of deep crimson blinked once, and then the Kyuubi let out a thunderous, barking laugh. "Run!" Kakashi yelled, but before he could pivot to leap from the tower, a deep, growling voice invaded his mind and stopped him in his tracks. Sasuke and Haku had similar reactions, and Hinata could only stare wide-eyed up at the fox. "Stay where you are, mortals," Kurama rumbled, lowering his head so that his eyes were level with them. "Unless you want this child to die. Naruto's alive," Sasuke blurted out, hope causing him to momentarily forget his fear. Hinata took in a sharp breath and struggled in Kakashi's arms until he numbly set her down. She took several quick steps towards the Kyuubi, heedless of the potential danger. Kurama's eyes narrowed and focused on the girl approaching his snout, and the barest smirk pulled at his expression. Ah, his girlfriend, the Hyuga, Hinata, was it? Hinata's face turned ashen and she stopped, wavering on her feet before nodding slowly. And Sasuke, the Uchiha boy. Hatake Kakashi, the infamous copy ninja, too. Even the new Haku kid is here. Each of them nodded in turn. They didn't dare turn and flee, especially after hearing that Naruto might be alive. "Is Naruto-kun still alive, Kyuubi-sama?" Hinata stammered, desperate to get the words out. Kurama rolled his eyes and snorted. "Can't you humans communicate without using your mouths?" he asked, annoyed. "If Naruto could figure it out, I'm sure you can." Hinata's lips parted to respond, then closed again. The Kyuubi smirked and shook its head. "I suppose there's not time for that. He needs your help. Naruto let me out himself, because it was his only chance to live. He clings to a thread between life and death, barely holding on through his own strength of will. I am using my chakra to mend his most grievous injuries, but without help he will be lost, and I along with him. What do we need to do?" Hinata's voice was high and filled with fear, but she forced herself to keep her eyes on the Kyuubis. If there was a chance to save Naruto, she would do anything. "His body is contained within mine now, absorbing my chakra. You have some skill with healing, girl, as does your teacher. I can push Naruto to the surface and allow the 2 of you to assist in his mending, but you will need to work fast and hang on while we move." "Move?" Sasuke asked dubiously. "Where are you going? Do you see another Biju around that can put that mad Tanuki in its place?" Kurama growled. Sasuke blanched and took a step back. "I'm going to force him out of the city and deal with him there." "Any questions?" Everyone but Kakashi shook their head quickly, and the Junin instead took in a deep, calming breath before turning to Haku. "Haku, help escort the villagers like I asked." But Haku started, but Kakashi cut him off. "Your duty as a shinobi of the leaf is to protect the citizens of Konoha, first and foremost. Don't let me down." Even Hinata turned from the Kyuubi to look back at Kakashi, startled at his words. Haku blinked at the man for a few seconds before smiling faintly, vanishing in a frosty mist a moment later. "Kyuubi no Kitsune," Kakashi continued reverently, turning to bow towards the colossal beast. "I have one request before we go. Make it quick. Our lives lay in the balance. All I ask is that you destroy the structure behind you before we leave the area," he continued quickly, nodding towards the indicated tower. Atop the building was Orochimaru's barrier, as well as the group of Anbu that were now trying to split their attention between Kurama and the field maintained by the 4 Oto Nin. The Hokage is trapped inside. A single tail swept down and across the midsection of the building, tearing it in half and sending a landslide of splintered wood and shattered stone cascading to the ground. Another tail ripped through the upper section, and a moment later the barrier flickered and died as the roof split on its way to the ground. "Satisfied? Let's go." Kakashi shut his still open mouth, rousing himself to follow the Kyuubi's orders. It was unnerving to approach the beast, but there was no way he would allow Naruto to die without doing everything he could to prevent it. Hinata made the jump first, leaping from the top of the wall and alighting on the bridge of Kurama's nose. The moment she made contact, she could feel its breath passing beneath her feet, a veritable typhoon of air being drawn in and pushed out every few seconds. Sasuke and Kakashi landed soon after, and she shook herself and hurriedly ran up between the Kyuubi's burning eyes. They reached the back of his neck and stopped when he spoke again. There will be best. You'd best use plenty of chakra to hold on. This won't be a smooth ride. They knelt and began to channel as much energy as they could spare to their feet, and were glad of it a breath later when Kurama lurched forward to bound through the hole Shukaku had left in the wall. His voice continued to echo in their minds, eerily clear alongside the wind rushing past. Uchiha, you'll have your part to play as well. Me? Sasuke asked, directing his thoughts rather than his voice. Words would be useless at such high speeds. Looks like you figured it out, the Kyuubi mused. While they work to heal Naruto, you'll follow my lead. Shukaku might be the weakest of the Biju, but he's not as foolish as he appears. His body is made of sand, making him virtually impossible to kill, so we must aim for his Jinchuriki. While the medium sleeps, Shukaku roams free. Gaara is inside of Shukaku too. Where? Either the forehead or chest cavity. I'll do my part in exposing the kid. You need to do yours in killing him while I hold the opening. Sasuke nodded, setting himself with grim, determined features. His eyes gleamed with the red of the Sharingan, each iris inlaid with 3 black tomo. He's coming out. Be ready. Hinata and Kakashi tensed as the fur at the center of the Kyuubi's neck rippled and distended. The first thing they saw was a familiar shock of blonde hair, and Hinata had to suppress her swelling tears. A moment later she had to hold back a wave of nausea as the rest of Naruto's broken body emerged. Much of the right half of his torso was still missing, exposing his regenerating organs to the air. The Kyuubi's chakra coated everything like a film, gradually stitching flesh back together and using Naruto's own cells to recreate what had been lost. His shattered ribcage was creeping back to its original form, curving back over his chest to reattach to his sternum. Even as they watched his previously half-destroyed lung finished forming, matching its partner with extremely shallow inflations. Neither of you have the skill to fix the serious internal damage. Focus on closing the wounds and resealing the abdominal and thoracic cavities, then rebuild the muscles in his torso and arm. I'll handle the nerves. Kakashi moved first. Hinata was trapped staring in pained horror for several long seconds before her teacher brought her back to her senses. Hinata, we don't have time to spare. Help me. She shivered and moved unsteadily to her fallen friend, forcing all abject thoughts from her mind and kneeling at Naruto's side opposite Kakashi. He nodded to her and placed his hands over one half of Naruto's chest, and Hinata mirrored him. The soft green glow of medical ninjutsu began to flow in alongside the scarlet of Kurama's chakra. Spare nothing if you want him to have a chance. You have only minutes to provide what aid you can before it's too late. Kakashi and Hinata said nothing, but the light from their techniques intensified until it was difficult to look at. Fleshy cavities stretched over the repairing innards, hidden slowly by creeping layers of bone and muscle. The tissues laced themselves together, spurred on by the influx of chakra. Shukaku loomed ahead, ignorant of the Kyuubi racing towards him in his crazed jubilation. Brace yourselves. The warning came only seconds before Kurama hit the Aikibi, ramming his shoulder into the giant Tanuki's back. All 3 of his passengers had to struggle to keep from being thrown off, and Sasuke even slid several meters up the fox's neck, barely hanging on with one foot. Don't lose focus, the fox growled as the force of the impact made Kakashi and Hinata's healing temporarily falter. The Aikibi was heavy. Its entire body seemed to be made of sand, which went a long way in absorbing the blow. He still stumbled and fell, however, causing a minor tremor. Kyuubi! Kyuubi! Shukaku screeched, flowing back to his feet and twisting around. You came out to play. The medium is dying, yes. You'll follow soon, soon. I'll. Kurama's tails arched up and over his back, pointing towards the Aikibi's chest. A black orb formed and hovered for a split second at the tip of each tail before launching towards their target. As soon as he released them, Kurama jumped away, distancing himself as if cautious of his own attack. Shukaku's grin fell, and for the first time he looked annoyed and serious. You always did try to ruin my fun, Fox. Why are we retreating? Sasuke asked, tensing so that his knees wouldn't buckle from the landing. Don't we need to get to Gaara as soon as possible? Getting him out of the village first. Confused, Sasuke assessed the situation. The border wall was a few hundred meters on Shukaku's other side, and the fox's attack didn't seem like it would be very effective in accomplishing his goal. The orbs were small, maybe 2 or 3 meters in diameter each. It wasn't until the Kyuubi slid to a halt and the 9 balls of chakra hit that Sasuke understood just how wrong he was. Shukaku's chest became the epicenter of the largest release of power Sasuke had ever seen. The explosion covered an entire block of buildings, vaporizing them instantly. An instant later, a giant black and beige blur flew back from the blinding display of energy, moving far faster than the enormous mass of sand should have been capable. Before the Aikibi's progress had even begun to slow, it collided with the thick barrier that marked the edge of Konoha, and it may as well have been made of paper. Shukaku careened through it, cutting a furrow dozens of meters across into the forest beyond. Another earthquake shook the entire village, but after a moment everything seemed oddly quiet. The sounds of fighting had ceased, and the only noticeable ambiance was the sound of fires spreading from the Kyuubi's attack. What? Sasuke began, eyes wide as he stared at the destruction. Bijuadama. A few small ones. Anyway, I didn't want to completely destroy that half of the village. A few small ones. Sasuke said faintly. This is so far beyond our level that I can't even begin to fathom their power. We're going. Remember the plan. Kurama dug his claws into a few collapsed homes and took off after his quarry, and Sasuke finally got a hold of himself enough to look around in the brief moments before they barreled through the newly created city exit. The arena was now a battered ruin, and the area surrounding it appeared to be in the same condition. Little damage had been done where buildings had not been flattened by one of the two-tailed beasts. In the distance, however, towards the north wall, Sasuke could make out 3 huge snakes wreaking havoc. The last thing he saw before leaving Konoha was a toad, nearly as tall as the Kyuubi, appear and crush one of the reptiles. The world lurched to one side as Kurama jumped right, narrowly avoiding a barrage of familiar wind attacks. Shukaku came into view as he was getting back to his feet, towering 10 times the height of the surrounding trees. Sand littered the area around the tailed beast, fully covering the treetops as it writhed and flowed back into its host. The Aikibi's chest had been collapsed inward, and a few rays of light poked through holes in the deepest sections. He looked furious. The Jinchuriki must be inside of his head. Be ready, the Kyuubi cautioned the group, leaping towards the sand monstrosity. Kakashi and Hinata braced themselves, and Sasuke dropped to his knees to take hold of 2 tufts of fur, channeling more chakra into his grip. Shukaku swung his tail around, intercepting the fox's extended paw. As Kurama's claws drove forward, sand shot from the Aikibi's tail, rapidly consuming his wrist. The Kyuubi snarled and raked at the sand with free claw, wrenching the other away and bounding back. What's wrong, Kyuubi? Shukaku sneered, whipping his tail back. I thought having 9 tails made you the stronger one. He opened his mouth wide, and countless globules of black and blue chakra began to merge together. The result was a sphere identical to the ones the Kyuubi had cast, except this one was much, much larger. Without preamble, the attack was launched at Kurama, aimed at his feet. Kurama pivoted, only having time to take a short running leap to one side before the Bijuadama made contact. The detonation that followed could only be described as catastrophic in scale. If it had gone off within Konoha's walls, it would have easily destroyed half of the village. The Kyuubi's size allowed it to cover a score of acres in a single jump, but even that was not enough to avoid the blast completely. The incredible force hit while he was in midair, and it was a struggle to keep from tumbling aside. Kurama managed to land hard on his feet, uprooting a few hundred trees as he slid across the ground. Damn the fourth for sealing away the other half of my chakra, the Kyuubi thought bitterly, his fangs parting as a bright red light formed within his mouth. An instant later he was on the move, sprinting in a wide arc around Shukaku and releasing a continuous stream of oblong crimson bullets. Where they struck, columns of brilliant light erupted into the sky, and before long dark clouds began to gather overhead. Are those fire techniques? Sasuke asked, squinting up at the sky through the rushing wind. The fox didn't respond, but the way that weather was changing was answer enough. He looked back to Shukaku, noting that despite their power the Kyuubi's attacks were barely moving the beast. The tanuki didn't even bother blocking them, allowing the abilities to take out huge chunks of his would-be flesh. Shukaku's strength lies in his body's constitution, but it is also his weakness. While he is nearly impossible to harm, his movements are sluggish. I'm going in to make the opening. Kurama changed course then, bounding towards the Ikibi and letting loose several more blasts of chakra. He held the last one longer, concentrating more and more energy until it shone bright even through his clenched jaws. With a deafening roar the Kyuubi released it, and this time a beam of energy slashed towards Shukaku rather than another projectile. The stream of fire was infused with immeasurable amounts of chakra, and when it sliced across the Ikibi it cut straight through. Shukaku screamed in anger as his body was severed from his left shoulder to opposite hip. His tail was caught in the line of fire as well, cut near the middle and falling with his mangled torso. Sand rained across the forest, crushing everything under its weight. Before the Ikibi's upper body had even hit the ground, Kurama was upon him, one forepaw stamping down on his attached arm and the other ripping towards his skull. The Kyuubi's claws tore into the sandy shell in two concise strikes, heedless of the flailing mass behind him. There. As the second swipe cleared Shukaku's face, Sasuke saw the hard exterior of Gaara's ultimate defense exposed beneath the surface. A moment later the fox grunted and was jerked back. The lower half of the Ikibi's body had reformed into giant clawed hand, and it was now latched on at the base of Kurama's tails. The Kyuubi snarled and dug in his claws, forming yet more chakra in his mouth. Go! He shouted, firing the final bolt straight at Gaara's shell. Sasuke sprinted forward without hesitation, leaping after the fiery blast just as Shukaku overpowered Kurama. The fox was wrenched back and heaved away, crashing to his side. Sasuke barely had time to hope that Hinata and Kakashi were safe with Naruto before the Kyuubi's attack hit ahead of him. It burst against the hard sand and was scattered, but not before melting a sizable hole through the shell. As Sasuke fell towards the opening he could see Gaara within, his bloodied body hunched over and struggling to breathe. The Kyuubi said to kill him, but while the medium sleeps, he only had time for one attack, and if he guessed wrong their entire plan would be for naught. If they didn't defeat Shukaku here and now, not only would Naruto's chance at survival disappear, but the village could be destroyed. Sasuke grit his teeth and pulled the katana from his back, channeling chakra into his hand. Electricity crackled in his palm, racing up the blade as he spun it around. He held the grip with both hands, driving it down towards Gaara's exposed chest. He aimed for the heart. The tip of the shining steel met the Jinchuriki's chest just as Shukaku's upper body shifted, throwing the attack off course. Sasuke landed hard on the smoldering remains of Gaara's shield, thrusting the sword down as far as it would go. He caught a glimpse of Gaara's eyes flying open, accompanied by a spray of blood from the boy's mouth as he gasped. An instant later Sasuke was thrown through the air as Shukaku screamed and whipped his head up, clawing desperately at his ruined forehead. No, no, no. I was out. I want to kill more. I want to live more. Filthy mortals. Cursed Kyuubi. Shukaku swept his arm at Sasuke, who braced himself for the impact. But a moment later the sand was breaking apart, and all that reached him was a broad wave that soon fell in a monstrous heap across the forest below. Sasuke was still traveling in an uncontrolled descent towards the treetops when he hit something surprisingly soft. He rebounded off of it, seeing only a flash of orange before he landed on his back, right into the Kyuubi's open palm. Good work, kid, Kurama rumbled, smirking down at Sasuke. That foolish tanuki is already nearly gone. It took Sasuke a moment to get his breath back and stand shakily, wincing as a lance of pain shot through one leg. Just as the fox had said, there was little left of Shukaku save for the gradually dissipating sand dunes. It was only then that he could survey the result of a brief battle between two-tailed beasts. Aside from the trench left behind from Shukaku's initial exit from Konoha, Everywhere the two Biju had tread had left an area barren of trees. The near-kilometer-wide crater from the Ikibi's Bijuadama was starting to fill with water, likely as a result of rupturing a natural aquifer deep beneath the surface. Dozens of smaller craters littered the forest as a result of the Kyuubi's fire attacks, and Sasuke could see several patches of forest burning steadily. The dark clouds above sparked with lightning, a precursor to the torrential downpour that began moments after. I don't think I killed him, Sasuke sighed, turning to limp towards Kurama's wrist. I aimed to, but Shukaku moved at the last second and I hit his lung instead of his heart. One thing both you mortals and we tailed beasts have in common is our drive to live. Shukaku may be mad, but he will do anything to survive, even if it means saving a vessel that he loathes. Sasuke nodded absently, too tired to think about much aside from his team's condition. He was completely drained, even after taking the soldier pill earlier. Before he had made it very far, the Kyuubi lifted its arm, depositing Sasuke unceremoniously atop its back. How's Naruto? He asked after stumbling to keep his balance and starting for where Hinata and Kakashi still knelt healing. As he approached, he could see sweat on their brows, and they both looked pale. Naruto's torso was almost completely whole again, and Kakashi was working on stitching his severed arm back together. The blonde's breathing was still painfully shallow, but at least he was breathing. I won't know until I go back to my cage, Kurama shrugged, starting back for Konoha at a slow walk. Sasuke slumped down next to Hinata as the green glow about her palms flickered and faded. She made a weak, frustrated noise and tried to continue, blinking away tears. Stop, Hinata, Kakashi breathed, looking more strained than they had ever seen him. You'll pass out from chakra exhaustion if you expend any more energy. I can finish this. Hinata looked as if she wanted to argue, but her half-lidded eyes couldn't lie. She wavered as her concentration fell, and Sasuke had to catch her before she could tumble from the fox's back. Kakashi grimaced and moved away from Naruto's mended arm, closing the last gaps in the skin at his side before withdrawing with a heavy sigh. The Junin looked across his fallen student and smiled faintly. Sasuke and Hinata were supporting one another, both determined to stay conscious despite their exhaustion. His body is nearly repaired. It's now up to him. Let's see if he has the strength break free from the clutches of death. Team 7 remained silent in the heavy rain, all watching as Naruto sank back into the Kyuubi. Kakashi turned to observe the ravaged forest, watching the fires dwindle and die around him. Flickers of movement drew his gaze to where Shukaku had been defeated, and he watched as three figures lifted Gaara's bloodied body from the sand before vanishing from sight. The battle must be dying down, he thought tiredly, turning his eye back to the village. Plumes of smoke rose from many places still, but the giant snakes were nowhere to be seen. Several squads were guarding the gate as they approached, further indicating that the conflict within the walls had been contained. They looked like tiny specks from so high up, but Kakashi could tell that they were panicking and running the moment the Kyuubi came into their view. Get down. I don't want to deal with your ignorant shinobi trying to attack me. Kakashi nodded to Hinata and Sasuke, who rose slowly with him. Kurama hunched his shoulders and lowered himself to the ground, collapsing trees on either side of the broad road with the action. One of the few ninjas still manning the door stared in blatant disbelief as the three passengers disembarked, dropping down from the Kyuubi's nose. What? Ibiki started, unable to finish as the fox's annoyed eyes flicked to him. He blanched and backed into the gate, remaining silent. Kakashi gave him a weak smile before turning back to Kurama. On behalf of Konoha, the Junin began, bowing deeply. Thank you, Kyuubi-sama, for aiding our village. And thank you, Hinata inserted quietly, for helping Naruto-kun. Sasuke nodded, meeting Kurama's eyes. To their surprise, the Kyuubi let out a deep, rumbling chuckle before closing his eyes. A soft orange-red light began to rise from the Biju then, slowly growing in intensity. Naruto wasn't lying about you three, he said, a touch of amusement in his tone. A Hyuga that lacks her clan's arrogance, a Junin that holds no grudge from my unwilling attack, and an Uchiha whose eyes don't seek to control my power. You're interesting, for mortals. I've never met humans like you. Kurama yawned and stretched as the light reached its brightest, its body shimmering and fading gradually. It was enjoyable getting to stretch my legs for the first time in 12 years. Now don't let this kid try to kill himself again, or I'll be back to give you hell. A moment later the Kyuubi was gone, leaving behind only a few stray shimmers of chakra and a single prone form in the middle of the road. Naruto. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. How many times am I going to wake up here? Naruto mumbled sleepily, rubbing his eyes and sitting up in the all too familiar watery room. Didn't you just say, see you on the other side? This is the same side. You're still not conscious, idiot, the Kyuubi said blandly, blinking its eyes open from beyond the sealed gate. But it appears you survived. What do you mean? Your soul has been flirting with the boundary between this life and the next for nearly 5 days. Normally a part of you is always present here, but even that was absent. Oh, Naruto started, not entirely sure what the fox meant. He remembered why he was going to die, and the Kyuubi's plan to save him, but little beyond that. It was all just murky blackness. Sorry if you got lonely while I was gone, he continued, smirking. What happened while I was, nearly dead? Kurama rolled his eyes, but didn't keep the tail from the boy. Whoa. You came out and fought the Ikibi. And Kakashi-sensei, Hinata-chan, and Sasuke all rode on your back. Your ability to ignore major ideas and get stuck in the pointless details never ceases to annoy me. Whatever. Naruto scowled, but before long he kept on asking for said pointless details, mostly on how Sasuke had defeated Gaara and the abilities Kurama and Shukaku had traded. He was silent for a long while after the Kyuubi explained how much time and chakra Hinata and Kakashi had spent in healing him. Everybody's safe though, right? Your team is, at least. I can't say about the rest of your friends or the villagers, but the casualties certainly range in the hundreds. It was a large-scale assault, and Shukaku likely racked up his own toll before I got him away from the city. Thank you for that, by the way, Naruto said with an appreciative grin. I know you didn't have to do it, and it sounded pretty troublesome. Kurama only snorted, closing his eyes again. Get some rest. You may be back here, but that doesn't mean you'll come out of your coma. Naruto's expression sobered and he nodded, wading over to the gate and sliding down with his back to it. Kurama, he began after a few minutes, staring off into the darkness. I heard something while I was gone. They were voices, and they were calling my name. One of the Kyuubi's eyes cracked open, looking down at the boy. You were very close to death. I wouldn't be surprised if you heard some of the deceased calling to you. They were my parents' voices. Kurama blinked both eyes open at that. I don't know how I know, but I know it was them. Naruto was quiet for a time, struggling to find the words he desperately wanted to get out. You told me that you know who my parents are. I told you that I killed your parents, the Kyuubi corrected bluntly, and Naruto recoiled at the words. After a moment Kurama sighed and softened his tone. He knew what the boy was after. Your mother's name was Uzumaki Kushina, and she was the second Jinchuriki that I was sealed into. Naruto froze and stopped breathing, and almost immediately his eyes and throat began to burn. Your father's name was Namikaze Minato, the fourth Hokage of Konoha. Tears were already flowing unashamedly down Naruto's cheeks, dripping steadily into the water below. Can you? He started, trying to hold back his choking tears long enough to make his request. I know that you killed them, and it's not something that can be changed. But if you were sealed inside of my mom, you'd know a lot about her and my dad, right? He sniffed and turned to look up at the fox, his eyes pained and pleading. I just want to know what my parents were like. Kurama was silent for a very long time, eyes having moved from Naruto's to stare off into open space. He didn't need to indulge the child. It might even be better not to. But he had lived through Naruto's anguish as well. Perhaps at the time he hadn't noticed it, but looking back it had been all too real. Mortals valued those that brought them into the world the same way the tailed beasts did their creator. To deny Naruto such a thing would only be cruel. We've got time anyway, he reasoned, though he wasn't fooling himself in the least. I know more of Kushina than Minato, but I will tell you what I know of them, up until the day they died protecting you, 12 years ago. Naruto didn't bother with stifling his tears as the Kyuubi began, realizing now what the fox had truly meant before. Sometimes being the one who lives is being the one who loses the most. He now understood how Hinata must have felt. Even though he hadn't fully seen it until then, he had been feeling the same way his entire life. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. It had been a calm night in Konoha, the first in the week since the attack. The artificial storm had caused it to rain for days, and a natural front had swept in afterward to continue its work. Naruto watched out of the hospital window as a gray morning began to break over the city. Signs of the battle were readily visible even there. Shukaku had come within a block of the hospital before Kurama had ejected him from the village. The rubble had been cleaned up by dedicated crews working through the rain, but it would be a long while before all of the damage would be repaired. Houses just across the street had been crushed by the Biju's titanic conflict, and Naruto had recently learned that some had still been occupied at the time. "Are you all right?" Hinata asked sleepily, rubbing at her eyes as she lifted her head from the pillow beside him. Just as he had stayed by her side when she had been in the hospital, Hinata had remained with Naruto through his time there. He had been greeted the day before by her tearful embrace, and he couldn't have imagined a better way to come back to reality. "I'm okay. Just thinking," he responded truthfully, refocusing on the window rather than what was outside of it. His reflection stared back at him, and it was an image he was still trying to get used to. Kurama said that there would be consequences beyond the physical scars. "I guess I just wasn't expecting this." Hinata nibbled thoughtfully on her lower lip as she sat up, leaning against the headboard beside Naruto and blocking his view of the window. She turned slightly to face him, undeterred by the pair of dark red eyes looking back at her. Then she lifted her hand and tapped his cheek with her fingers, smiling gently. "Remember what you told me in the woods, just before the first exam?" Naruto glanced down at her hand, then back up as the memory came back. Hinata continued when she saw that he remembered, still holding a small smile. "I'm not going to smack any sense into you, Naruto-kun, not in that way at least. But you were right. I do know you, and I know that just because your eyes look different and your teeth got a little sharper, it doesn't mean you're not yourself anymore. And I have to cut my nails almost every day." He smirked wryly, lifting a hand and examining the tips of his fingers. Though he had filed them the night before, his thickened nails had already begun to extend into points like miniature claws. He took Hinata's hand after a moment, giving it a light squeeze. "Thanks, Hinata-chan. I know I'm still me. It's just taking some getting used to, I guess." She nodded and returned the gesture, blushing lightly and turning her eyes to his hair. "I do like your hair, though, it's so subtle I almost missed it at first." Naruto grinned then, running his spare hand through his spiky blonde locks. The roots had been turned a bright reddish hue, but seemed to go no further than a centimeter past his scalp. "I like it, too. The Kyuubi said it's almost the same color as my mom's hair. It's like I've got a little bit of both of my parents up here now." He tapped his head, and though Hinata could see the faraway sadness in his eyes, there was also an abundance of joy. Before she could ask after another story about his parents, however, a knock came at the door. Hinata glanced over at it, wondering who might be checking up on Naruto at such an early hour. "Come in," Naruto called, making a face at Hinata before the door opened. "The medic Nin said I could leave today. Are you here too?" He trailed off as a man stepped into the room, and immediately stiffened upon recognizing the high brow and intense white eyes. "Greetings, Uzumaki Naruto," Hiashi said sedately. To Naruto's surprise, and Hinata's shock, he bowed, and the action didn't appear forced in any way. He turned his eyes to his daughter, and for the first time in her life she could see regret and pain behind his impassive features. He inclined his head to her as well, voice becoming lower. "Greetings, Hyuga Hinata. I've come to speak with both of you, if I may." "Anyo," Naruto began, glancing quickly to Hinata. She had tensed immediately upon seeing Hiashi, and was still gripping Naruto's hand tightly. She nodded slowly to her father, then again to Naruto. "Sure, Hiashi-sama. What did you need to talk about?" He had trouble addressing the man with such reverence after hearing about what he had put Hinata through, but if she was willing to hear him out he wouldn't be rude. "Hiashi hesitated, taking in a deep breath and smoothing his expression over. I came to thank you, Naruto, for saving my daughter's life. Naruto blinked at him several times, processing the expression of gratitude. And I also came to apologize for the opinion I have held of you up until now. It was unfair of me to judge you so harshly, especially after Hinata had tried to convince me otherwise. Ah, no problem, sir. Naruto didn't know what to say beyond that, struck dumb by the sudden and sincere apology. Hiashi nodded, then turned his eyes back to Hinata. Hinata, I have treated you unfairly as well. No, he corrected, grimacing and shaking his head. I have wronged you terribly, and failed you as a father in my blindness. I wished only to make you strong, not realizing that you were becoming so on your own. In my folly I cast you from our clan. I wanted you to stay away from Naruto because I thought him dangerous, but I see now that I was a fool all along. Hinata took in a sharp breath as Hiashi lowered himself to the floor, prostrating himself before the two of them. When he spoke his voice nearly shook, stricken with emotion. I know it is selfish of me, but I ask your forgiveness, daughter. Hinata was silent for a time, and the seconds dragged by until she slid off of the bed, stepping over to her father and kneeling in front of him. When she finally spoke her voice was calm and gentle, though edged with the same tearful emotions that Hiashi's was. I forgive you, father, of course I forgive you. Please stand up. He straightened slowly, and when she met his eyes they were shimmering with unshed tears. Without waiting for him to rise, Hinata shifted her weight and fell forward into him, wrapping her arms around his waist in a firm hug. Hiashi stiffened, staring over her head in surprise as if unsure how to react. His eyes fell on Naruto, who was smiling at the two of them as he mouthed the words, "Hug her back," miming the action. The man blinked a few times before raising his arms and following the boy's advice, pulling Hinata close to him and returning the embrace with more fervor than either of them had expected. Several minutes and many sniffles later they separated, standing together. I have one more thing to tell you, both of you, Hiashi said after a deep breath, turning first to his daughter. I wish to reinstate you as heiress to the Hyuga clan, Hinata, and welcome you back to the estate. I know that I may be too late to mend the damage that I have caused, but the choice is yours to make. Hinata bit her lip and looked back at Naruto, though he only shrugged and smiled at her. May I have some time to think it over? She asked hesitantly. Hiashi bowed again, and Hinata felt another surge of emotion at his unexpected understanding. Naruto, he continued, turning to face the boy and inclining his head once more. The Hyuga will recognize you and Uchiha Sasuke as friends of our clan, and you are both welcome in our homes from this day forward. Should you ever find yourself in need of our aid, we will provide it without hesitation. More than any other of Hiashi's statements, this choked Naruto up the most. It was a simple show of appreciation, he knew, but he was being accepted. Not only that, but he was being called a friend of the most influential clan in Konoha. Thank you, Hiashi-sama, Naruto said gruffly, bowing as best he could from his bed. Hiashi returned the gesture, and then moved to place a hand on Hinata's shoulder. He offered her a kind smile before turning to depart, closing the door silently behind him. Both Hinata and Naruto watched the door for some time before she finally shivered and returned to the bed, though she lingered without getting in. I guess things might be changing soon, she said quietly, turning towards the window. I guess so, Naruto agreed, watching as the first rays of sunlight began to spill over the horizon. Some things don't ever change though, right? He could see the corner of Hinata's lips quirk up in a small smile, and as she nodded he was struck anew by a thought that had been plaguing him since he had intercepted Shukaku's attack. He flushed as he spoke up again, and his heart rate sped up without warning. Hey, she turned to look at him, and his blush deepened as he searched for the right words. I heard what you said, just after. He trailed off, and recognition caused Hinata's cheeks to color a brilliant shade of red. She turned away hurriedly, and Naruto couldn't help but notice how pretty she looked silhouetted against the rising sun. An impulse took hold of him, and before he could lose his nerve he reached out for Hinata's hand, pulling her off balance. She turned in the middle of her fall, eyes growing wide in surprise as his other arm swept around her waist and pulled her to him. Time stopped as Hinata caught herself on his chest, and Naruto's lips touched her own in a soft, infinitely delicate kiss. Her eyes grew wider still, and before her mind could stop racing he broke the contact, leaving her stunned and staring at his reddened features. Sorry, he stammered. Hinata came back to herself long enough to realize that Naruto looked distraught. He felt guilty for having kissed her. She hesitated only a fraction of a second before making a faint, reassuring sound and pressing forward again. Her eyes eased shut, and her entire body relaxed. Her hands crept over his shoulders and laced behind his neck, pulling her closer to him and deepening the embrace. What began as a tentative, fragile thing gradually became more intimate. It was as simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying as she had ever imagined it would be, and though it was awkward and full of inexperience, it was real, and it was theirs. Neither of them had a clue how much time passed, but when their lips finally, reluctantly parted, the sun was clearly visible above the horizon. Their eyes opened gradually, and Hinata found herself looking into the slit-like pupils of Naruto's new eyes. But they're still his, she thought distantly, reaching up to touch his cheek. He grinned sheepishly, and after a few seconds of staring Hinata blushed and buried her face in his chest. She lowered her hands and let them snake around behind him, not willing to let go just yet. Naruto wrapped both arms around her waist and held on tight, speaking softly into her ear words that she had been waiting so long to hear. I love you too, Hinata-chan. Chapter 18. Learning Curves. Ow! Hinata gasped, pulling back sharply. Naruto blinked his eyes open when he felt her withdraw, and he noted the red droplets on her lower lip immediately. The blonde licked his own lips. The metallic taste of blood was unmistakable, and it was getting to be all too familiar. Fangs again? He asked quietly, sounding crestfallen. Hinata looked apologetic even as her tongue poked out at him, displaying a small cut at its tip. She rested her head back in the long grass and flushed lightly. It's not that bad, she assured him, tapping a finger to the small injury. A tiny green light sparked at her fingertip, and in a few seconds there was no sign of the cut. See. Besides, I'm still getting used to this, Hinata continued, gesturing vaguely at everything and nothing at the same time. While she had meant the recent influx in intimacy, especially this kind of intimacy, Naruto took it as his cue to roll off into the grass beside her. She blinked and squinted at the sun, something he had been inadvertently blocking for her a moment before. I am too, he sighed, flopping onto his back. You know I bit through my lip again this morning after breakfast. And I'm still not used to seeing myself in the mirror, and... Naruto trailed off as Hinata sat up next to him. She leaned over and placed a very soft kiss on his lips, unabashed in her show of affection. I meant that I'm getting used to that, she said with a giggle, moving to lay her head on his shoulder. One hand rested on his chest, over the area where his shirt hid the worst of the scarring. When she had seen it for the first time, Hinata had nearly fainted. Naruto shifted the arm she was using as a pillow, wrapping it around her back and resting his hand gently on her shoulder. Oh, he responded after a long pause, glad she couldn't see his blush. Yeah, that too. Hinata smiled and snuggled closer against his side. Things had been like this since Naruto had been released from the hospital a few days before, which had been long overdue. Even though there had been nothing physically wrong with him, the medic Nin had insisted on keeping him there for an extensive battery of tests, likely to figure out why he was okay after what he had gone through. But at least he was out now, and every chance they got Naruto and Hinata would slip away to one of the more remote training grounds. 28 today. Sasuke sighed from behind them. Before, the couple might have scrambled apart, but such a time had long since passed. Hinata looked up and gave their friend a sheepish smile while Naruto tilted his head back and smirked at the other boy. We've only been here an hour, Naruto said affably, stifling a yawn. If you get any faster at finding us, we'll never get any alone time. Sasuke rolled his eyes and sat down on the blonde's other side. Kakashi-sensei wanted me to come get you too. We've got that debriefing with the Hokage in 30 minutes, remember? We were going to meet you there on time, Naruto said defensively, though there wasn't quite enough conviction in his voice to persuade Sasuke. Right, Hinata. Of course, she confirmed, covering her mouth with one hand and trying not to laugh. She got control of her expression quickly, however, flushing when she heard him say her name. It had felt like such a natural transition after that morning in the hospital. They were officially dating now, as Sasuke liked to point out, and along with that fact came a slew of things neither of them had thought about, including the way they addressed each other now. It hadn't been something that required discussion. It was just Hinata and Naruto. Now, where's Haku-chan? She asked after a moment, glancing around. Aren't you two always together? He's running some errands, Sasuke replied nonchalantly, ignoring the grin spreading across Naruto's face. He'll meet us there. When are you going to say something to him, Sasuke? The blonde probed. Even if you don't like him like that, it's obvious that he has feelings for you. Being in a relationship doesn't make you an expert on other people's feelings, jerk. And I never bothered either of you about your budding romance over the last few years. He flashed a smirk at the pair, who were, as expected, quickly turning red. Besides, even if I did like Haku, I don't have time for that. We make time, even if it's not a lot, Hinata said slowly, trying not to blush any more than she already was. Iruka-sensei always says to make the most of life, especially as a shinobi. Our lives have the potential to be far too short, and I know I'd regret it if I didn't get to love somebody. Naruto nodded and squeezed her hand, drawing a faint smile back to her lips. The harsh memory of almost losing him was still far too fresh in their minds, proven further by Sasuke's lack of response. Maybe you just haven't met the right person yet, Naruto suggested as he stood, helping Hinata to her feet. How did your second date with Sakura-san go? It was fine, I think, Sasuke shrugged noncommittally as he followed their lead. I think she's finally gotten over her infatuation and lost some interest, though. Well, you are really boring, Naruto quipped, earning him a light punch to his shoulder. He chuckled before continuing, lacing his fingers with Hinata's as they started back towards town. But all right, I won't bother you about it much. I think you should give it one more try, at least. The two boys glanced at Hinata when she offered her suggestion, each raising a surprised eyebrow. Just to be sure, I just think that, maybe you're not giving it a fair chance because it didn't start as a real date. You only went out with her the first time because you wanted to teach Ino-san a lesson, remember? Sasuke considered that for a few seconds before shrugging again. I guess so. I'll think about it. They walked together towards the Hokage's tower, discussing their plans for the afternoon's training. There had been little time for much outside of helping clean up the village after the attack, but Team 7 always managed to find a way to fit training in. Hinata and Naruto also made time to spend together every day, even if it was only a few short minutes. Hey, Naruto waved as they turned onto a main street, flagging down a clone that was trotting by. His bunchen slid to a halt, fumbling with and nearly dropping the buckets of nails he was carrying. What? I'm busy here. The clone snapped. Naruto blinked, donning an annoyed expression after recovering from the momentary surprise. I'm just checking to see how things are going, jerk. For the half that haven't been dispersed, at least. Oh, you mean the ones that people haven't destroyed yet? The copy was obviously irate, and Naruto couldn't help but sigh and shrug. Alright, whatever, just keep helping out. Yeah. By the way, I think one of the others snuck off with her clone, the bunchen said with a devious grin, nodding at Hinata. Her face reddened immediately, and Naruto's mouth worked like he was trying to find something to say. They caught each other's eye and looked away quickly, silently agreeing not to release those clones until absolutely necessary. The bunchen snickered, but a moment later a copy of Sasuke ran by carrying a stack of wooden planks. The fake Uchiha flicked Naruto's doppelganger as he passed, smirking all the while. The blonde winced, then scowled. Hey. Completely forgetting the trio in front of him, the clone turned and raced after the fleeing offender. Is there really no way to control their personalities? Sasuke sighed, rubbing the back of his neck and looking a little self-conscious. Hinata and I only made 2 each, and both of mine were pretty strange. If there is, I haven't figured it out, Naruto huffed, trying not to let his embarrassment show. People are still afraid, aren't they? Hinata asked quietly after they began walking again. Her hold on Naruto's hand tightened slightly as she made her inquiry, already knowing what answer would be coming. Can you blame them? Naruto responded dryly, flashing a small smile at her. His red eyes flashed in the sunlight, and one of his fangs was visible before his grin faded. From what you and Kakashi-sensei told me, there would have been a lot of Anbu and Chunin that saw me transform, and now I look like this. And there's always the fact that you didn't kill anybody, Sasuke interjected evenly before Naruto could finish. The collateral damage was unfortunate, but it was unavoidable. He cast his friend a sharp look, though it only earned him a shrug in return. Even if they don't get it, you should know that there would have been a lot more casualties if Kurama hadn't gotten Shukaku away. It's terribly flattering how your acquaintances refer so casually to the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the fox drawled. Hey, it's better than having to say, Kyuubi, or, the fox, all the time. And if you missed it, Sasuke basically just thanked you. Naruto received only a low, dissatisfied growl in response. I know that. It's just hard to blame them for not liking me now. Before they didn't have a real reason, but he shook his head and shrugged again. Even if it was the only option, people died, citizens of Konoha died, and to them it looks like it was me who did it. It's not fair, Hinata insisted, her brow knitted in concern. The Hokage made it clear to everybody what happened, and even that you, I mean, Kurama-sama, saved his life by destroying the tower. What's right? Fairness. Naruto waved his free hand, shaking his head tiredly. Doesn't matter. I don't want to talk about it. He knew that his friends wanted to protest, but he was thankful when they allowed the conversation to lapse into silence. There were enough things to think about without having to worry over what the villagers thought of him. If the Sandaime and those close to him believed in him, then that was enough. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Sarutobi Hiruzen was an old man, but Naruto had never realized that fully until now. Team 7 and Haku stood in front of the Hokage's desk, all facing the village leader with carefully neutral expressions. The Sandaime was leaning back in his chair, examining his guests thoughtfully with the slightest smile tugging at the corners of his lips. His left eye was covered with bandages, as were his neck and right arm. The lines of his face seemed deeper than before, and there was a dark circle under his visible eye that told of recent restless nights. Thank you for coming, Team 7. And you as well, Haku, he began serenely, nodding to them as they bowed in response to his greeting. Kakashi has already submitted his report regarding your actions during the invasion of Konoha. I wanted to thank you personally for not only showing exceptional prowess in battle, but especially for saving countless lives in defeating the Ikibi. You have displayed ability beyond your years, and you have proven beyond any doubt your loyalty to Konohagakure, all of you. His eye twinkled as he gave Haku a brief smile. The boy flushed lightly and bowed. Naruto forced himself not to fidget or speak up, but he knew the last part had been meant for him as well. Your acknowledgement is humbling, Hokage-sama, Kakashi began formally. I have never been more proud of my students. Do not think that just because you omitted it in your report that I do not know why I am alive today, Kakashi, Hiruzen chuckled. If not for your request of the Kyuubi, I may have died at Orochimaru's hands. And I must not forget to thank you as well, Kyuubi no Kitsune. The Hokage spoke just as calmly as before, but as his intense gaze met Naruto's eyes it felt like the old man was looking into him. There was no fear or judgment in his dark eyes, only gratitude and sincerity. You may tell him that his gratitude is accepted. If Naruto didn't know any better he would have sworn that Kurama was purring. The Kyuubi appreciates your thanks, Naruto relayed with another bow. But I wouldn't flatter him too much, he's still a jerk. The Hokage blinked in surprise, and the others trained their features carefully not to betray any amusement at the remark. Hiruzen, however, let out an uncharacteristic laugh that lasted for several seconds, and his audience finally allowed themselves to loosen up and grin. One can always leave it to Naruto to brighten a conversation, he said after a few mild coughs, wiping a tear from the corner of his eye. Perhaps the Kyuubi is a malign individual, you would know best, after all. But by his will Konoha is safe, and that deserves gratitude regardless of temperament. I guess so, Naruto shrugged, though he couldn't help but smirk. And you call me asinine. Well, Now that we are a bit more relaxed, I would like to get on with the purpose of this debriefing. Their expressions sobered at once, and even the Hokage's normally placidity turned into seriousness. The official death toll amounted to 348 men, women, and children. Less than half were shinobi that perished in the line of duty, most were civilians, killed by shukaku, enemy ninja, or the snake summons. Jiraiya defeated the latter before it could get too far into the city, and once the Ikibi had been expulsed, the sand and sound forces retreated or surrendered quickly. My fight with Orochimaru ended when the Kyuubi collapsed the tower. The 4 Oto Nin and my former student were gone before the first stone hit the ground. I expect they did not like the odds of engaging the Hokage with several Anbu squads and a Jinchuriki to back him up. That leads me to you first, Naruto. He settled his eye on the blonde in front of him before continuing, speaking very deliberately. As I understand it, you would be dead if not for the choice to allow the fox to surface. However, despite that choice saving your life and many others, it may have put your life in greater jeopardy. Sir? Naruto asked, confused. The Hokage was quiet for a time, and the silence only made Naruto all the more disconcerted. We do not know much, the Sandaime began slowly, as if considering every word with great care. But what information we do have you have a right to know, as do those close to you. I must require, however, that you disclose what I am about to tell you to no one. Am I clear? Each of them, even Kakashi, nodded, and after another brief moment of hesitation Hiruzen continued. Jiraiya has spent the last few years on what might be considered an extended mission, one I consider to be beyond S rank in gravity. He has been tracking Orochimaru's movements, and through that task he has been gathering information on a certain group that has recently risen from the shadows. Hiruzen looked pointedly to Kakashi, who narrowed his eye before finishing the thought. Akatsuki, the Junin said quietly. That is the name they go by, the Sandaime confirmed, his expression grave. They are an organization now made up of 9 extremely powerful S-rank shinobi, as it seems Orochimaru left their ranks not long ago. According to Jiraiya's intelligence, the members of Akatsuki recently split up into teams of 2, and have begun traveling around collecting techniques, and possibly other more valuable things. Anyo. Naruto began hesitantly, his mind racing with questions. That all sounds. Well, it sounds really serious, but what does it have to do with me? We have no means of proving it just yet, but Jiraiya suspects that they may be after the Biju, and subsequently their Jinchuriki. Naruto balked and paled at that, and he could feel Kurama bristling already. That is nearly the extent of what we know or assume. I expect Jiraiya will have more to say to you on the matter later, but for now at least you know the possibilities. The blonde boy nodded tightly, saving his many unspoken thoughts for later. Sasuke, there is something of the Akatsuki that concerns you as well. You will discover it eventually, but I would rather you hear it from me than for you to find out on your own. Hiruzen turned his eye on the young Uchiha, and his features seemed to soften a little. Sasuke tensed and clenched his fists, but he kept his stoic facade. Itachi is one of the members of Akatsuki. Sasuke's Sharingan activated of its own accord. His blood turned to ice in his veins, but it was boiling a breath later. His mask broke into an open snarl, and he all but spat out his next statement. Does Jiraiya know where he is? No. Hiruzen replied immediately in a steely tone, as if he had anticipated Sasuke's response. Even if his location was known, it would not be revealed to anyone under any circumstance. You know what he is capable of better than most. Would you throw your life away engaging him now? Sasuke took a step back as if physically struck, and it was then that he noticed Haku's hand on his shoulder. The Hokage gave the boy an appreciative, grandfatherly smile. I know that you seek retribution for your clan, Sasuke, and I do not have the right to stop you from obtaining it. But I do have a responsibility as the one that has given you this information to make certain you use it as a caution, and not as an incitation. Sasuke started, struggling to control his emotions. I understand, Hokage-sama. I appreciate your concern, but I know my limitations, and I've already given my word to go after Itachi the right way at the right time. Naruto grinned and nodded with Hinata, and Haku gave Sasuke's shoulder a light squeeze before lowering his arm. Hinata, I understand that Hiashi has asked you to return to the Hyuga clan. Hinata stiffened and nodded. The old man smiled and inclined his head in what could only be a measure of thanks. It seems that your actions, and those of all of Team 7, have changed Hiyashi's outlook. I was informed recently that he is even considering changing a few of the clan's laws regarding the branch family. Hinata allowed her astonishment to show for only a moment before her features smoothed over again. She bowed before speaking, her voice clear and respectful. I am pleased to hear it, Hokage-sama, and it is true that I have been invited to reassume the role of heiress. I'm afraid that my role in swaying his opinion was minimal, however. Kakashi, the Sandaime said amusedly, shaking his head, are you teaching your students to be as neglectful of their own accomplishments as you can be? Hinata is always as modest, Hokage-sama. I assure you that neither Naruto nor Sasuke lack any amount of ego to make up for her humility. Haku had to suppress a giggle at the man's words, and Hinata immediately flushed bright red. The two boys in question each gave their sensei a level look before turning back to Hiruzen with flat expressions, though Naruto at least seemed a little embarrassed. A balanced team is important, the Hokage said with a light chuckle. In any case, I do hope you decide on your own what you will do. Always do what is in your best interest, and never forget that, in all likelihood, you are the only one that knows what that is. He had to hide a knowing smile when the young Hyuga's eyes flicked to Naruto. Although I'm sure your friends are pretty close. Hinata couldn't help but give a demure smile at the old man's advice. I've heard that a certain young man evacuated the majority of the villagers from the arena last week, he said mildly, finally turning his gaze to Haku. And that his means of doing so were fairly creative. Naruto and Hinata looked over at Haku curiously, though Sasuke only smirked and kept his eyes forward. Tell me, Haku, how did you come up with that idea? Hokage-sama, Haku started, bowing deeply. The spectating area was very far from the ground level, and I determined that it would take far too long to guide the villagers down the many flights of stairs while also ensuring their safety. I decided the most efficient means would be to craft a broad, closed chute of ice that lead down from the southern end, and would serve not only as an expedient exit but also as a protection against potential attackers. Its gradient was appropriately adjusted for a gentle descent, he added at the end, looking a touch embarrassed. Sound reasoning, Hiruzen nodded, smiling warmly at the boy. And thanks to your actions the villagers were indeed evacuated in a safe, timely fashion. Tell me, though, if you did not possess your Kekkei Genkai, how would you have managed your task? I would have created clones at a ratio of 1 to every 10 villagers and escorted them through the tunnels of the arena. My chakra capacity has increased in my time spent training with Team 7, and I believe I could have managed that many in addition to more to guard our front and rear. Haku's response was immediate, as if he had gone through the scenario in his mind already. Hiruzen nearly spoke again to commend him for his forethought before the boy continued. Another option would have been to use an earth technique to modify the exterior wall of the arena, detaching a section and creating a ramp for everybody to proceed down. Even Kakashi turned to blink at Haku, clearly they hadn't been through his thought process on the matter. I decided quickly that those two options would either have been too time-consuming or vulnerable to an enemy assault. The latter especially would have required me to modify the wave of earth jutsu on the fly, and even had I managed it the villagers would have been exposed on their way out. Using my bloodline ability proved to be the best option for security, practicality, and swiftness. Haku took in a deep breath, nodding once at the bewildered Hokage. I hope my reasoning was sound, Hokage-sama. Quite, the Sandaime murmured, taking a moment to reach beneath his desk and withdraw his long pipe. Smoke rose from the bowl at the end, although nobody had seen him light it before taking a slow draw. Well, Kakashi, Hiruzen said calmly, reaching into his desk once again. I think it's fair to say that Haku has proven himself enough, don't you think? He placed a plain wooden case on the tabletop, sliding it forward reverently. May you serve Konohagakure well, Haku. The boy looked confused as he regarded the box, and he glanced questioningly over at Kakashi a second later. Go ahead, the Junin said with a nod towards the box. It's a gift. A gift from the Hokage. He stepped forward, carefully lifting the lid of the container. Hinata gasped as he revealed what was inside, and both Naruto and Sasuke grinned. This is a leaf hit I ate, Hiruzen confirmed, his eye twinkling as he spoke. Your altered sentence allowed for you to become a full-fledged Konoha shinobi, pending Kakashi's recommendation and my acceptance. If you recall, my advisor, Kaharu, wished you to become useful to our village eventually. I believe you have proven yourself, and you have grown considerably since arriving here. Haku didn't speak for a moment. He stared at the shining metal plate of his new forehead protector, tracing the engraving of the leaf symbol. He had been accepted, trusted. It was almost too overwhelming to think about, but he managed to keep his expression solemn as he lifted and tied the Hittite in place. The familiar feeling of a forehead protector was something he had missed. It felt like coming home after a long time away. He stepped back and bowed again, his voice thick when he finally managed to get his words out. Thank you, Hokage-sama. It is an honor to be of use to Konohagakure. Of use. Hiruzen mused, nodding. Yes, I suppose, all shinobi should be useful, Haku. But that is a sign that you are a friend and ally of our village, and that you will fight to protect it. It is a token signifying that you are willing to take on the will of fire. Will you do this, Haku? The boy couldn't respond beyond a tight nod, not trusting his voice. The Sandaime smiled and inclined his head, allowing a few moments of silence. Naruto, Hinata, Sasuke, Haku, I thank you again for your service to the village. I look forward to seeing you grow to be even stronger as a team. They all bowed in unison, eliciting a small smile from the old man. You four are dismissed. I have a few things to discuss with Kakashi before I can let him go. North Wall, Kakashi said as his subordinates turned to depart. I'll join you there shortly. None of them spoke as they left the room, though he expected a wide range of conversation to start up soon. The Hokage had touched on a great many things, and they had been taken on quite the emotional ride. Do you have any recommendations for Haku's new station? Hiruzen asked after the others had gone. He used to be a member of Karigakure's Hunter Nin unit before defecting with Zabuza. I believe he would work well in one of our Anbu divisions, or even as a Chunin team leader. Danzo has asked that he be admitted to Root. I told him, quite firmly, that Haku's assignment would be left up to you. Hiruzen watched for Kakashi to betray his feelings, but as expected the Junin had perfect control of his expression. I do not think that wise, Kakashi said simply. My recommendation would be for him to initially be assigned as a Tokubetsu Junin. Oh, why is that? The Hokage asked mildly, though his calm expression implied that he already knew the answer Kakashi would give. His skill set makes him ideal as a future Anbu assassin. His speed, intelligence, and ability with ninjutsu are unmatched for a child his age, and his Kekkei Genkai gives him an edge no other shinobi would have in combat. I believe the rank fits, and it would allow him to become my subordinate. As a former member of Konoha's Anbu, I can train him before you officially invite him into the ranks. That is, if you approve of the assignment. I agree. I will fill out the appropriate paperwork. Have him come by later this afternoon to get his picture taken and identification in order. Kakashi bowed in acknowledgement, and when he straightened again the Hokage's expression had become severe. That aside, what I said to Naruto is no small matter. I understand that Jiraiya has spoken to you about Akatsuki, so you know well how dangerous they are. I do not believe they are audacious enough to do any more than gather information within our city, but you think they are or have been here already? Kakashi cut in sharply, forgetting himself for a moment. I do. I believe that if given the opportunity they will take Naruto, or perhaps one of his friends to get to him. Kakashi's eye narrowed, and Hiruzen was both surprised and comforted to see the protective look. Jiraiya is considering taking the boy under his wing for the time being. Isn't he supposed to be going to look for Tsunade? Kakashi asked, working to keep the concern from his tone. Yes, but I can't think of a person that Naruto would be safer with than Jiraiya. That aside, he has the right as the boy's godfather. Kakashi gave a begrudging nod. No matter how skilled he was as a shinobi, even he didn't come close to one of the Sannin. He believes that Naruto might be able to help convince Tsunade to come take my place as Hokage. She can be very stubborn at times. Naruto does have an odd way of getting people to believe in him, Kakashi admitted. At least, people that don't carry an unreasonable disposition towards him already. Hiruzen frowned and shook his head, looking just as old and tired as he had at the beginning of their meeting. I will leave the decision to Jiraiya. If Naruto does leave with him, you have my permission to have Haku serve on Team 7 while he is away. He is in more of a hurry than I am to see me retire finally, so you will hear from him within a few days, I'm sure. He gave a dry chuckle and sighed, sinking back into his chair. As you wish, Hokage-sama. Was there anything else you needed to speak with me about? That was all from me, Kakashi. Although, he continued as Kakashi bowed, Asuma wanted me to pass along his thanks to Naruto. Apparently his team has been training especially hard lately because of something your student said to Shikamaru during the Chunin exam. Kakashi raised an eyebrow, and Hiruzen shrugged. I'm not sure the details myself. I've had similar reports from Kurenai as well. I see. I will be sure to let him know. Has there been a decision regarding the exam? The examiners all agreed that both Naruto and Sasuke possessed more than adequate strength to become Chunin, but the test was interrupted too early to make any sound judgment regarding their intelligence and decision-making ability. It was decided that a new selection exam will be set up in 2 months following repairs to the village. The other countries were gracious enough to allow us to host it again. The Hokage tried to keep his tone mild, but he didn't manage to keep all of the annoyance from his voice. Needless to say, it will be on a much smaller scale without participating members from the Sand and Sound. That seems reasonable enough, Kakashi said before bowing one last time. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen sat facing the window, puffing thoughtfully on his pipe long after Kakashi had departed. His body ached, and he wanted nothing more than to go back to bed. I suppose Kaharu and Homura were right to convince me to choose a successor. I can only hope that Tsunade will come back. He sighed, closing his eyes for a few seconds before turning back to his desk, and the proverbial mountain of paperwork he had to do before the day was out. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I made sure to tell them to wear their normal clothes, Kakashi assured Iruka. The Chunin sighed in relief, donning a sheepish grin just after. Good, because I don't think I'd survive being outdone by my former students again. They were standing just outside the door to Yakiniku-Q, exchanging idle chatter in the gathering dusk. It had been another long day of cleaning up rubble and breaking down debris, but with the section near the north wall complete, the task was nearly finished. Those four are a force to be reckoned with, Iruka said with a shake of his head. Naruto's multitude of clones is more help than anybody could ask for, but now that Hinata and Sasuke can make a few themselves, it's like we've got a miniature army for a cleanup crew. It does appear that way sometimes, but the others can't be forgotten either. Haku can freeze and shatter large bits of debris to make it more manageable. Choji is perfect for moving around the bigger items with his expansion jutsu. Sakura has been pretty adept in demolishing irrecoverable structures. This list goes on. Iruka smiled and nodded, though Kakashi's humility for the sake of his team couldn't alter the Chunin's focus. I know, but you've worked closely with those three over the last few months. You know better than anyone how much they've grown in such a short time. That I won't deny. I don't really know. I've never seen genin, much less an entire team, so driven. I suppose that's what happens when you're as close as those three are, Iruka said with a small laugh. Speaking of closeness, have you noticed anything odd about Naruto and Hinata lately? I can't really put my finger on it, but their behavior has changed since last week. I suppose that's to be expected, though, since the attack. Kakashi blinked owlishly at him for a few seconds before smirking, a bit of mischief in his eye. You have absolutely no clue that they're dating, do you? The Junin watched with no small amount of amusement as Iruka's expression changed. His eyes first went wide, then narrowed in thought, before finally settling on annoyed confusion. Since when? And why wouldn't they tell me about it? He huffed, folding his arms and scowling. Since after Naruto woke up in the hospital, if I had to guess. Kakashi shrugged, still grinning beneath his mask. They've been going off together when they think nobody will notice, doing who knows what. Iruka's mouth worked for a response, but Kakashi continued before he could get a word out. And Naruto's become like your son. Iruka, do you really think children naturally tell their parents things like that? The only reason I know is because I spend a great deal more time with them. But they sleep together. Iruka blurted out, pausing a moment later to cover his mouth and turn several shades of red. I mean, not like that. They fall asleep on the sofa together, and I thought it was just cute. Cute. It is cute, Iruka, Kakashi sighed, waving a hand. They're not even 13 yet. They've still got another 2 or 3 years before you need to be worrying over that. Just be glad this isn't the hidden sound. I hear they start having kids by 16 or so. Surprisingly, Iruka sobered rather than becoming more flustered. He shrugged and rubbed at the back of his head, staying quiet for a time before speaking up again. I guess that is the world we live in, he said finally. The higher chance one has of dying young, the more the motivation. This is the fate of shinobi, I suppose. Still, I'd feel better if I talked to them about it. That's your prerogative as their guardian, Kakashi said lightly, still a touch amused by what he had just learned about his students. But I'd save it for when you get home, and 2 extras aren't standing behind you. Iruka had time only to raise a questioning eyebrow before Naruto's voice piped up. What are you talking about? He probed immediately, wondering why Iruka's face was so red. He was standing hand in hand with Hinata, of course, with Sasuke and Haku standing to his other side. Ah, what we're going to order for dinner, Iruka explained lamely, earning him a snort from Sasuke and a snicker from Haku. Naruto only rolled his eyes. Okay, whatever. Let's celebrate. I bet everybody else is already here. Kakashi nodded and turned to lead the way in, followed by his subordinates. Iruka watched after them for a moment, sighed, then shook his head as he followed. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. A toast. Guy veritably roared, his cheeks flushed deeply. He had been drinking far too much sake over the course of the evening's meal, and was now standing with one foot on the table and the other on his chair. A toast to my eternal rival Hitaki Kakashi. And to his team, of course, he finished with a hiccup, giving Team 7 an exaggerated wink before downing his saucer of alcohol. Chaya. Waiter. More sake please. I think you've had enough, sensei, Tenten muttered as she helped him slide back to his seat. She glanced apologetically across the table to Kakashi and Iruka's party of 6. I did warn you all about this. As long as he's having fun, Naruto laughed. I'm glad we decided to have a party. Everybody does seem to be enjoying themselves, Sasuke mused, sounding only marginally less bored than usual. Their former classmates were seated all around them down the long table, creating quite the ruckus within the restaurant. Team 8 was at the far end with Kurenai, engaged in an argument with Asuma's team over the quality of the barbecue pork. At least, most of them were going at it. Shino and Shikamaru seemed content to play a quiet game of shogi on a travel set that the Nara boy liked to carry around. Asuma and Kurenai sat beside one another, chatting amiably and blushing far more often than anybody noticed. Did Neji Nisan have a prior commitment? Hinata asked Lee from across the table. She knew what the answer would be before the boy even shook his head. He said he would rather train, Lee shrugged. Neji has been dedicating far more time to his training than usual, and I can't fault him for that. Guy Sensei says that he is taking charge of his youth and learning from his mistakes. I see, she responded worriedly, but her concern lessened considerably as Naruto's hand took hers beneath the table. He didn't say anything. In fact, anything he might have offered would have likely been a negative remark towards her cousin. But the simple comfort of his presence helped assuage some of her anxiety. An actual toast, Kakashi started, tapping his chopsticks loudly enough against his plate that their gathered friends quieted. He stood and looked around, making sure to catch every one of the genin's eyes before continuing. A toast to friends and family lost, and a toast to life. Every person present, even the young ones, solemnly lifted their saucers of sake, taking a reverent sip before setting it down. To Konoha and its resilience, Kurenai proposed. To the will of fire, Asuma added. To youth, Lee cried, his eyes already half-lidded as he swayed dangerously in his seat. To friends, and love, Tenten put in with a warm smile and a none too secretive wink at Hinata and Naruto. The couple blushed together, but drank a little more enthusiastically to that. Murmurs of agreement rose with every tribute, followed by a brief moment of silence. Finally, after it appeared that no further acknowledgments would be offered, Iruka stood up and raised his drink. To the Konoha 12, he said with a proud smile, "My former students, and our new addition." Iruka smiled and nodded at Haku, who was still wearing his new hitayate. The boy flushed and beamed up at him, though before everybody could drink he went on with the toast. "To you all, the future of our village, for your bravery and camaraderie in the face of a great crisis. May you grow and fight together, and always support one another as you have." A round of cheers rose from the table, and the last of the sake was drained to Iruka's praise. He sat down flustered but glowing, observing the young shinobi he had spent half a decade mentoring. They ranged the spectrum of joy, from the very reserved Shino giving a firm nod to Lee nearly breaking the table as he leapt upon it in his zeal. "I'm proud to have been your instructor. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I'm pretty sure Guy-sensei will have to pay for the damages," Naruto said as he closed the door to their apartment. "I had no idea Lee could fight like that, though. I don't care how he fought," Iruka sighed, sinking into the chair opposite the couch. Guy shouldn't have accepted Lee's youthful challenge. It'll be a week before they repair the damage to the restaurant. At least it was as everybody was leaving, Hinata offered, suppressing a giggle. Iruka couldn't help but smile, though when his eyes fell on their linked hands he remembered that he still had something to do. It was late, but he knew that if he put it off that he wouldn't have the gumption to do it later. "Do you two have a minute to talk?" Naruto cocked his head to one side, as if trying to figure out what Iruka's tone implied. He shrugged and nodded, as did Hinata, and they moved to the couch together. "Sure. Iruka-sensei. What's up?" the blonde asked tentatively. Usually when Iruka wanted to discuss something casual he just brought it up. Asking them for a conversation was indicative that this would not be one of those times. "I'm an adult, and as of now I'm responsible for them. It's my duty. I can do this no problem. Sex. We need to talk about it." Nailed it. Hinata and Naruto both blinked once, then stared at him. It took several seconds for the color in their faces to surpass that in their mentors, but in moments the pair was so red that Iruka was pretty sure they had created a new hue. "Iruka-sensei." Naruto blurted out finally. "Why do we need to talk about that?" "Because you two are dating now, and things happen," Iruka shrugged, calming down a little. His two charges were carefully avoiding eye contact with one another, and he hadn't even seen their hands return to their own laps. "I know you're still young, but it's better to get this out of the way early on. Besides, it's not like it's weird or an anathema." "Anathi what?" "Something frowned on," Hinata murmured. "Oh, right. But, I mean, we're only 12, Naruto protested, trying to find a way out of what he knew would be the most awkward conversation of his life. "Isn't that stuff for adults? You may be young, but you are adults," the Chunin said calmly, pointing to his forehead protector. "You were adults from the moment you received these. Don't you think it'd be a little weird if you were allowed to die for your village, but not allowed to? To love somebody like that. Wait, we're allowed to do that?" Naruto asked incredulously, wrinkling his nose and making a face that was somewhere between disbelieving and disgusted. "Damn it, not what I meant. No. Well, I mean yes, technically, but no." They both looked equal parts mortified and confused. Iruka sighed, rubbing at his temples. This was much more difficult than he had imagined it would be, and he had thought it would be terrible. "Look, when you graduate the academy you are considered adults in the eyes of the village, which means you can legally act on your own. You can sign contracts yourself, buy property, go outside the village, anything that a normal adult can do. And yes, that includes that too. Normally a child is under their parents' rule and protection until 16, but shinobi are a little different. Again, if you're permitted to die for your village, it stands to reason that you can have other adult responsibilities." "I guess that makes sense," Naruto agreed begrudgingly, though he still looked uncomfortable. Hinata was switching between smoothing her skirt and fidgeting with the bracer on her arm, though Iruka knew that she was listening because her cheeks colored more as he spoke. "So instead of treating you like children in this matter, we're going to just talk about it plainly, alright? It's not taboo, It's not embarrassing, and it's not strange. It's just a part of life that needs to be discussed openly. Ask me any questions you have about anything I talk about, okay? Both of them still looked fairly uncomfortable, but they nodded all the same and listened as Iruka started. Surprisingly enough to all parties involved, the conversation quickly became more relaxed and comfortable. Naruto and Hinata seemed to take to heart his assurances, and even asked a few tentative questions here and there. Nobody was blushing anymore as Iruka wrapped up the talk, though the young couple was still avoiding eye contact as much as possible. Lastly, Iruka said after nearly an hour had gone by, try to be a little more careful about putting yourselves in that kind of situation, alright? I know you two fall asleep together a lot while you're up talking, and I don't want to discourage spending time together, but just be aware of those temptations later on when you might not be ready for them. Yes, sensei, they said together, both smiling sheepishly. Good. Iruka sighed after a good stretch. I guess this is a good chance to mention two other things, though the first is a question for you, Hinata. The girl blinked at him, prompting him to continue. Have you decided what to do about Hiyashi's proposal? Hinata began, glancing quickly at Naruto. I have, I think. I believe my father is sincere, and I would like to accept his offer as far as becoming the heiress to the clan again. But, she hesitated, and it wasn't until Naruto took her hand again that she kept going. I don't think I'm ready to move back to the compound just yet. I was considering getting my own apartment. I know you've said that I can stay as long as I need to, but this is your home, sensei. And I think Naruto should have his room back, she finished with a slight flush. Iruka grinned and shook his head. Hinata, this isn't just my home. It's our home. Besides, even though I tell you not to, you still pay me for rent, you help clean and cook, and you keep Naruto out of trouble. What more could I ask from a guest? Hinata blushed and giggled, and Naruto scowled half-heartedly. But that does lead me to my next topic. My pay was raised recently, and with both you and Naruto making quite the sum of Ryo from missions, I was considering moving to a new apartment with an additional bedroom. You're welcome to come with us if you'd like, and then you could both have your own room. Naruto grinned, though he had to keep himself from expressing his desires aloud. This had to be Hinata's decision, and even if he wanted her to keep living with them, it might not be in her best interest, in the Hokage's words. I'd like that, she said after a short pause, inclining her head to Iruka. It took a considerable effort to hold back her tears. Our home. She was being given the chance to continue living near Naruto, and in so many words she was being accepted into their small family. It was far from the family she had been born into, but it was the family that had taken her in when she had been alone, and it was the one she would choose over any other. It's settled then, Iruka said happily, standing with another stretch. We'll all go out to look for apartments together starting next week. Try to get to sleep soon, he continued as he reached the living room's threshold. Kakashi said that you have some new training starting tomorrow morning. We will, Naruto assured him. Iruka lingered in the doorway for only a moment before smiling and moving off down the hallway. The door to his room clicked shut a few seconds later, leaving Hinata and Naruto sitting in silence for several minutes. It was a comfortable quiet, with both of them simultaneously enjoying each other's presence and deep in their own thoughts. It wasn't until Naruto yawned that Hinata broke the silence. I guess I should be getting to bed, she said slowly, giving Naruto's hand a squeeze before rising. Iruka-sensei said to avoid these kinds of situations, right? She smiled mischievously and tapped her nose, pretending that she didn't notice Naruto's grumble as she strode across the room. I guess, Naruto said with an exaggerated sigh. I still think it's really weird that he wanted to talk to us about that. I mean, you don't ever think about that stuff, do you? And no. Hinata quickly switched off the light to hide her blush, though she stopped before exiting the room to glance back into the dimness. She could still see Naruto's vague silhouette, but his eyes shone far too bright for the modicum of light coming from the hallway. Hinata had looked into those eyes many times over the last week, and only recently did her mind stop going back to the Kyuubi's crimson irises when she saw Naruto's. She pursed her lips and turned back on an impulse, rushing over to the sofa and throwing her arms around his neck. Naruto was taken by surprise and toppled sideways, though he managed to get his arms around her waist before his back hit the cushions. Didn't you just say something about these kinds of situations? Naruto teased. His vision adjusted quickly to the darkness, and he watched as Hinata pulled her head back and clicked her tongue quietly. Her ponytail had fallen over one shoulder and now trailed by his collarbone, sending a shiver up his spine. I'll go to bed soon, Hinata said softly, her lips so close that he could feel them move when she spoke. I just wanted to talk first. They talked for nearly 15 minutes before separating, which only happened due to their need to breathe. They lay facing one another for a time, Naruto with a hand on Hinata's hip while she lay curled against his chest. Their eyes were closed, and before long both were breathing deeply. Neither of them realized that sleep was quickly taking hold, and before long the beginnings of dreams began to creep into their fading consciousness. That is, until they both twitched and bolted upright at the same time. What? Who? They each stared into empty space, their breath coming quicker and quicker. Hinata. Naruto started, heat rising in his cheeks. Did you ever release that last clone? And no, she stuttered. Did you? Her head was spinning, but she knew that the lightheadedness had little to do with the returning memories from her bunshin. No. Were they? This whole time? I think so, Hinata responded faintly, her thought process failing her completely. The memories settled after several long seconds of the most furious embarrassment she had ever experienced, leaving an all too clear picture of what had been going on between their clones for the last 12 hours. Oh, she started, unable to think of anything to say. Oh. Maybe sleep was a good idea after all, Naruto said hoarsely, twiddling his thumbs. Yes, definitely a good idea. Hinata all but fell off of the couch in her hurry, bolting out of the door into her room in the blink of an eye. He heard a flustered, "Good night," whispered from down the hall just before the door to her room snapped shut. Naruto was left staring after her for a long while, speechless. He wasn't quite sure when he fell asleep, but he remembered thinking about swearing off of shadow clones until much, much later. Chapter 19. Of Things Sentimental. So you've decided to take him along, then, Kakashi said evenly as he watched his team train with an unreadable expression. Jiraiya replied. It may be unfair of me, but Naruto bears a resemblance to Tsunade's lost brother, Nawaki. At least, he does in spirit. I think having him along may help persuade her. I see. The only display of unease that Kakashi allowed was a shifting of his weight, disguised as him finding a more comfortable place to lean his back against the tree they shared. It was another sunny morning, instilled with a cool breeze that signaled the coming of autumn. The leaves of the trees surrounding the third training ground were beginning to display a myriad of warm colors as well. None of the scenery interested the younger Junin, however, and instead he focused carefully on his students. Again, he called. Genjutsu. Binding, Hinata murmured, focusing on Naruto and Sasuke. A breath later they stood completely still in front of her, frozen by the technique. Sasuke relaxed after a moment, stretching to show that he was free of the ability, but Naruto remained motionless. Kakashi-sensei wasn't joking when he said that Genjutsu was hard to break without a hand seal, he ground out in his mind, struggling to disrupt his chakra flow and shake the technique. It's not that difficult, Kurama yawned. Like Kakashi said. Focus on your chakra flow, hold it for a split second, then release it in a burst of energy. I can't see chakra flow like they can, he retorted. How am I supposed to visualize something that I've never seen? And what does this have to do with the gates? You've seen diagrams in the academy. Those gates limit the flow of chakra through your body. If you stop the flow at any of the gates and release it, the genjutsu should break easily. Figure it out. Naruto growled at the following silence, annoyed at how easily he was being incapacitated. He turned inward for the umpteenth time. Hinata said the gate of opening was the best one because it's near the motor thing in my brain. Just have to concentrate on my chakra. Come on, you stupid gate. An entire minute of straining yielded only sweat and frustration. Hinata began to look concerned as Naruto's face contorted, and he would have cursed if he had been able to. She's about to undo it. You're hopeless, the Kyuubi sighed. Just as Naruto was getting ready with an appropriately hostile remark, an orange spark flashed in his mind's eye, illuminating a spectacular something. It lasted for the briefest instant, but the imparted image burned itself into his memory as if it were his own. Naruto was now reflecting on a perfect representation of the chakra circulatory system inside of his own head, complete with the two major nodes containing the gate of opening and gate of rest. Whoa. Is that really what it looks like? Kinda looks like veins and stuff. It's called the chakra circulatory system for a reason. Do you try to be this ignorant, or does it just come naturally? Shut up. Naruto glowered. And thanks, he added with begrudged sincerity. He focused on the three-dimensional picture Kurama had provided, trying to gather his chakra at the gate of opening. Keep it there. Gather more chakra. All at once he forced his chakra to stop circulating, holding it for less than a second before releasing it in a small burst. The result was noticeable, to say the least. Naruto's onlookers took in a collective breath as an explosion of blue chakra erupted from the side of his head, throwing him off balance and sending him toppling to the ground. Ow! He groaned, wincing as he put a hand to his throbbing head. Did it? Probably gave yourself an aneurysm, too, Sasuke smirked, offering a hand to help his friend up. I mean you did do it, but what happened? Are you alright? Hinata asked worriedly, likely afraid her genjutsu had been the cause of the mishap. I'm fine, Naruto said with a sheepish grin. Just used too much chakra, as usual. Kurama showed me well, he showed me something. I guess it was a picture of what my chakra circulatory system looks like. It helped me visualize it better and block the flow at the gate. Oh, she responded, looking surprised and a touch guilty. I'm sorry. I never considered that you couldn't see it like we can. No big deal. You guys may have special eyes, but I've got a grumpy fox in my head that helps out every once in a while. Naruto grinned, accepting Sasuke's hand and pulling himself up. Despite themselves, his friends smiled as well. The blonde was never one to get down on himself, and he always found a way to keep up even without a Kekkei Genkai. Good, Kakashi said as he strolled over beside Jiraiya. While not acceptable yet on your end, Naruto, still good. The boy couldn't decide whether to scowl or beam. I'm going to do some more advanced genjutsu training with Sasuke and Hinata. Jiraiya needs to speak with you. You look like you need a good cure for a headache, Jiraiya chortled. I'll treat you to some ramen while we talk. Naruto's features lit up for a moment, though he sobered quickly when he realized what was coming. Kakashi had told him that the Sannin was likely going to talk to him this week, but the topic of discussion had remained a mystery. It had only been 4 days since then, and Naruto had a feeling the news wouldn't be good. Alright, he shrugged, turning to follow the man out of the clearing. He flashed a smile back at his friends before disappearing beyond the tree line. Remember what we did yesterday? Kakashi started mildly, waiting for his two remaining students to nod. We're going to do it again, only this time I'm going to use it on both of you. But how? Hinata began. I'm not going to let you seriously injure one another. If you can't break out of it on your own before things get out of hand, I'll cancel it myself. Remember, this is a very powerful forbidden jutsu. If you can free yourselves of this, you'll be safe from all but the most advanced techniques. Ready? Sasuke's expression turned stony, and Hinata's concern seemed to evaporate as she took on a similar demeanor. Kakashi nodded, bringing his hands together into a dragon seal and muttering, Megan, insanity. Both Genin's bodies went rigid for a few seconds, their eyes widening before they shuddered and became very still. Without warning, Sasuke whirled and launched a blast of fire at Hinata, who spun to one side even as several of her kunai were flying towards her new adversary. The Uchiha leapt back, but the explosive tags attached to the knives went off and sent him flying away. He growled and flipped in midair, launching 2 fists of shuriken just before landing. Hinata's palms moved like lightning, deflecting the projectiles with pinpoint bursts of chakra. They clashed again a moment later, fighting against each other just as hard as they were trying to break themselves of the terrible genjutsu. It would be another long morning. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Naruto stared down at his untouched bowl of ramen, and despite its enticing aroma he couldn't bring himself to start eating. Jiraiya was seated at the stool beside him, shamelessly flirting with Ayame and drawing disapproving glances from Chuki. The young woman laughed and went along with it for a while, politely turning Jiraiya down when he asked if she might help him with some research. The whole ordeal only made Naruto more uneasy, and it was only after Jiraiya made a particularly lewd comment, and got scolded by the owner, that he finally spoke up. What did you want to talk about, Jiraiya-sensei? The old Sannin blinked and glanced over at his pupil, eyes flickering to the shop owners before he spoke in what sounded like a natural tone. No hurry, he said casually, cutting himself off with a mouthful of noodles. Finish your ramen first, kiddo. Naruto got the hint. Jiraiya didn't want to speak openly about it while Chuki and Ayame were present. Without any other options, he started into his meal, and immediately regretted not doing so earlier. As always, Ichiraku's ramen was the best. It wasn't long before Naruto was draining the lukewarm broth from the bowl. It had been incredible even after sitting for so long. Alright, he sighed, leaning back as he finished. Chuki and Ayame had gone to the back claiming the need to do inventory, though Naruto had a suspicion that they had just caught Jiraiya's subtle hint. Can you tell me now? Always impatient, Jiraiya grumbled, taking a swig of sake from a flask hidden in the folds of his vest. Kakashi's probably told you already, but the Hokage is retiring. He and his advisors have chosen a successor. Naruto nodded. None of this was news to him. They decided to beseech Tsunade, another of the Sannin, for the position. That was news, though. I've heard Tenten talk about her before, Naruto started slowly. She's famous for her medical ninjutsu, right? And for her incredible strength. I used to ask her on dates and I'd land on my back 100 meters away. Jiraiya barked out a hearty laugh, shaking his head. The higher ups say that she's the most logical choice, if not the only choice Konoha has. But what does that have to do with me? It was a simple question, but the answer was a complicated one. Jiraiya studied the boy for a moment before folding his arms and continuing. Tsunade is also stubborn, and she may not accept it so easily. To put it bluntly, I think you might be able to help convince her. Me? Why? Naruto asked incredulously. Because Kakashi tells me that your goal is to be Hokage one day, Jiraiya said with only the slightest smirk. Naruto nodded unabashedly, but he still looked confused. And, I can't really share with you all of the details as to why you'd be of assistance, but your drive to become Hokage alone should help. Basically, you may be the deciding factor in helping Konoha find its new leader. He's not telling you something. Pretty sure he just said that, genius. But if I can help convince Tsunade to come be Hokage, what does it matter? He's not telling you something important, Kurama growled. Leave the snark for less serious matters. He probably wants to keep an eye on us. You want me to come because you want to keep an eye on me, don't you? Maybe, maybe not. Jiraiya shrugged, though when he glanced over to see Naruto's quirked eyebrow he sighed and relented. Fine, yes, that's part of it. But it's not because anybody told me to, he added quickly. It's because, well, because you're my godfather. Naruto ventured innocently. The look on his sensei's face was priceless. How? Jiraiya almost looked offended for a moment before his eyes narrowed and he scowled. You know, it's not exactly fair that you have a damn-tailed beast in your head sharing things with you. You're the legendary Toad Sage. Sensei, I'll take what advantages I can get. They shared a grin at that, lapsing into a short silence. How long will it take? Naruto asked after a moment. A week. 2 at most. Jiraiya seemed confident in his response. It wouldn't be a long trip to wherever Tsunade was, then. Okay, I'll do it. Are Hinata and Sasuke coming too? He asked hopefully. I think Kakashi has some special training planned for those two, it's probably more genjutsu stuff. Don't worry, though, I'll have some for you as well. Jiraiya smirked, and his student's face lit up. Is it another cool technique like the Rasengan? Jiraiya's expression sobered then, and he looked thoughtful as he swirled the contents of his flask. Seeing as you knew about me, I take it that the Kyuubi has told you about your parents. Naruto nodded slowly, turning back to the counter. I wanted to teach you some more of your father's techniques. I know you have the capability to learn them, and I think he would have wanted to pass them on to you. The Yondaime. Naruto started, shaking his head after a moment and smiling faintly. My dad was an incredible ninja, wasn't he? I believe that Minato was the strongest shinobi that ever lived. He was Konoha's yellow flash, revered throughout the world. He was extremely intelligent, powerful, and kind. But your father wasn't just an incredible ninja, Naruto. He was the best man that I've ever known. Jiraiya left his praise there for a time. He glanced to Naruto, who he could tell was struggling to keep his composure. He probably only learned about all this recently. Poor kid. Sounds great. It had been a minute or two before Naruto could respond, his voice a bit shaky as he rubbed at the corners of his eyes. When do we need to leave? Tomorrow morning, Jiraiya responded as he stood, stretching. He set a few extra ryo on the counter with the amount that was already there, winking at Naruto before he turned to leave. Have another bowl. One thinks somebody else wants to talk to you. Naruto blinked up at his retreating sensei before looking back over the counter. Chuki had just emerged from the back room, and there were tears in his eyes. There weren't any other customers at the moment, but it seemed that their conversation had not been entirely private nonetheless. I owe you an apology, Naruto, he began with a heavy sigh. The old man almost looked physically pained. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to tell you about your parents. I wanted so badly to, especially in the past when you had a more difficult time with the villagers. It's all right, sir, Naruto assured him, trying his hand at a confident grin. I know the law was there to protect me, and that you didn't have a choice about it. Still, I want to at least make amends for my inability to tell you about your parents. I've been waiting to be able to tell you about them, and some things I think they'd have wanted to tell you if they were here today. This was almost getting to be too much for Naruto, almost. Kurama had told him about his parents, although it had been more of an overview. Going over their entire lives would take a long time, and there were bound to be things even the Kyuubi hadn't known. All of the new details coming out about his parents were a little overwhelming. He could only nod for fear of letting more emotions swell up. Your parents used to come here often. Not as frequently as you and your friends, of course, Chuki smiled, gaining back some of his natural warmth, but frequently enough for me to get to know them. Your mother was one of my first regular customers, as a matter of fact. Business was slow after we opened some. Ah, how long has it been, dear? Almost 34 years, Dad, Ayame said as she passed by with a tray of uncooked noodles. Honestly, I've hardly been alive for half of that time and I remember better than you. Bah, you're young. Have mercy on your poor father's memory. Chuki chuckled, turning back to Naruto. Anyway, for the first few years business was a bit slow. But when Kushina moved here from Whirlpool Country, she started coming just about every other day. She'd always order salt ramen, he laughed, leaning back against the nearby wall. You're a lot like her, you know. Strong-willed, passionate, and very kind despite the circumstances you've had to deal with for your entire life. You don't quite have your mother's fiery disposition, but you can get boisterous when you want to. Not so much so these days, I guess. Naruto gave the old man an appreciative smile. She brought Minato here on what I gather was their first date, much like you brought Hinata here a few years ago. He winked, and Naruto flushed. Oh, their relationship was something else. She would always talk his ear off and he'd just sit there listening, patient and understanding. People used to say that they never understood what he saw in her, but he most certainly saw something he loved. As they grew up and took on more responsibilities, I saw them less, of course. They still came by between missions, though, always together. I think I was one of the first to know about Kushina's pregnancy. Those two were absolutely glowing when they told me they were expecting a child. They would talk about their hopes for you, Naruto, and their plans as a family. He stopped for a few seconds when Naruto couldn't suppress a small sob, which he did his best to disguise as a cough. Chuki's eyes softened further as he continued. Even before you were born they loved you with all of the devotion that only parents have to their children. I can see now that you've inherited Kushina's heart and mind, and your father's body and ability. I know they would be proud of you, Naruto-kun. Thank you. Naruto got out after a moment, once again wiping at his eyes. He couldn't think of anything else to say. Thank you, Chuki-san. I'm just glad to finally be able to tell you, Tsuki said graciously. There's one last thing, though. Naruto looked up at him, his cheeks still slightly wet. The man reached into his coat and drew out a folded red cloth, extending his arm to offer it to the boy. Your mother went through a phase around your age where she wore a red headband very similar to yours. She got mad and took it off one day when Minato teased her about it, and she accidentally left it here. I tried returning it on multiple occasions, but I think she was too embarrassed to take it back. I eventually forgot about it, but now I think you should have it. It's not much, but it's at least one keepsake of hers. Naruto was speechless. While Tsuki had said that it was basically of little significance, it meant the world to him. He reached out and took the simple length of cloth, carefully unfolding and staring down at it for a long while. He started, trying to find the right words. Tsuki smiled and nodded at him, accepting the unspoken thanks. Don't mention it. I'm just glad that this old man can be of some help to you finally. Now, how about that bowl of ramen? Naruto was silent for a time. He untied his hitayate and the violet cloth he had always kept beneath, reverently replacing the latter with his mother's old article. The two crimson tails trailed down between his shoulder blades just like the other had, but for some inexplicable reason this one felt right, and somehow more comfortable. He tied his forehead protector in place again, the faint smile from earlier back on his lips. I think I'll have some salt ramen this time, Tsuki-san. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. It had been a long day for Team 7. After Naruto had left Ichiraku, he had gone back to train, and though his ability to break out of genjutsu had improved, he still lacked the skill that Sasuke and Hinata possessed. While he had been away with Jiraiya, they had both managed to break free of the insanity technique. Naruto was a quick learner, but by the end of their session he still couldn't get the hang of it. Chakra control had never been his forte, and though he had improved immensely over the year, it wasn't enough. Alright, that's enough for today, Kakashi told them as dusk started to set in. Naruto, I want you to do chakra control exercises every day while you're gone. Being able to recognize and break yourself out of advanced genjutsu is a necessity for an adept shinobi. I know, Naruto groaned, massaging his aching temples. I will, sensei. He didn't even think of complaining about the new training. They had all asked their instructor to train them harder in the aftermath of the attack, and Kakashi had certainly accepted the request. It was hard, but he knew it was important, especially if he wanted to be as strong as his dad one day. I've never had a headache this bad, Sasuke muttered as they walked back towards the village. I'm pretty sure half of it is from having my brain messed with so many times, and the other half is from one of you punching me. I'm sorry, Sasuke-kun. I didn't mean to, she replied, looking genuinely distraught. It still took me too long to break it after I figured out how. Hey, you can still free yourself faster than I can, and I'm the one with the Sharingan, he joked, shaking his head. And don't worry about not getting it yet, Naruto. I can always stick a kunai in your foot if you take too long. I'm sure you would, too, Naruto said with a smirk. I'll get it eventually. For now I just have to settle with being able to kick your ass at everything else. Sasuke was clearly unconvinced, but there were more important things to talk about. Their fake egos would have to wait. What kind of techniques did Jiraiya-sensei say he'd teach you while you're gone? He didn't say anything specific, but if my dad used them I'm sure they're awesome. I just hope I don't have to be gone too long. He didn't glance aside to Hinata when he spoke, but he gave her hand a brief squeeze. She returned it before speaking, purposefully skirting that particular topic. The Yondaime was known as Konoha's Yellow Flash, wasn't he? I remember learning about him at the academy. During the Third World War, enemies were given flee on-sight orders if he was on the battlefield. Hinata flushed lightly when her two companions blinked over at her. What? You two had the same classes that I did. That doesn't mean we paid any attention in history, Sasuke said dismissively. But was he really that strong? Jiraiya-sensei said he was the strongest shinobi of his time, and maybe ever, Naruto said with a proud grin. He invented a lot of his own jutsu that don't need hand seals, like the Rasengan, and he was apparently faster than lightning, or something like that. That's not even possible, Sasuke replied, putting his hands up defensively when Naruto frowned at him. Hey, I'm just saying that nothing moves faster than light. Lots of people have tried, but even a shinobi's body has its limits. I guess. The blonde didn't seem to want to admit that his father couldn't have lived up to his fame. But I mean, summoning stuff makes it move faster, right? Technically, Hinata inserted. It doesn't move, though. It just gets transported from one place to another instantly. I remember my father going over space-time ninjutsu, and he described it as making a hole in reality in two places, then pulling something through it. That sounds weird. Naruto's face was scrunched up a little, like he was trying to picture it in his mind. Really weird. Anyway, I'm sure he really did it. Sasuke shrugged, and Hinata nodded confidently. They walked the rest of the way to Iruka's together, giving Naruto suggestions on what to bring along for the trip and planning things to do when he got back. Sasuke bid them farewell at their building, promising to meet them at the gate in the morning. It was dark in the apartment when Naruto and Hinata entered. The place was empty, which was odd for this time of day. Normally they would find Iruka busy in the kitchen, starting on the evening's meal and welcoming their assistants. I guess he got held up today, Naruto pondered aloud as they finished checking around. Want to get started on dinner before he gets back. We should make all of our favorite foods, since I won't be here for a while. We should, Hinata said with a bright smile. I'll start on Iruka-sensei likes grilled chicken and steamed vegetables, right? And do we have anything for a sashimi dish? Yeah, I got some squid this morning. Iruka-sensei loves squid, so that'll be great. I'll make the miso soup, and I'll try to make the zenzai again, but after last time. He made a face, and Hinata had to suppress a giggle. Well, it's your favorite, so I'll do my best. It's one of yours too, and I liked it last time. She insisted, turning on the stove and reaching for the wok. When she had first learned of Naruto's other favorite food, months before they had begun living together, it had given her a bit of joy to know that they shared something else in common. You're just saying that, Naruto grumbled, though there was little conviction in his tone. But thanks. He grinned and stole a quick kiss before getting to work on the red bean soup, also trying to stealthily prepare what he knew was Hinata's other beloved dish. Iruka came home to the savory aromas drifting from the kitchen, as well as the constant chatter between his two charges. Despite the long, arduous day he had experienced, the Chunin smiled. He had never anticipated that adopting one child, and taking in a second, would result in such joys as coming back to a lively home. It was something he thought about often nowadays. A real family, huh? You two are unbelievable, he sighed, shaking his head at Naruto and Hinata as he entered. I smell my favorite chicken recipe. Hinata beamed at him. I don't remember teaching you that. I watched you make it once, she admitted, looking a little guilty. Naruto wanted us to have our favorites tonight. What's the occasion? Iruka asked, walking automatically to the rice maker. I see you're even making zenzai, and are those? I'm leaving with Jiraiya-sensei on a mission, Naruto said quickly, eyes flickering to see if Hinata had glanced back at him. He relaxed a little when she didn't, quietly slipping a tray into the oven. I might be gone for 2 weeks, so I wanted us to eat a great meal together. I see. Iruka kept himself from frowning as he set the rice to cook, realizing afterwards that they had everything else covered already. He sank into a chair by the table, thinking. Make sure you don't forget anything, and be safe. I will. You don't have to worry about me, Iruka-sensei. We're just going to find Jiraiya-sensei's friend Tsunade. Iruka looked up at him sharply, eyes calculating. He had heard rumors about the Hokage stepping down, and about his potential successor, but this information more or less confirmed it. I'll worry about what I want to, Iruka teased in response, readopting a grin. Naruto made an impudent face back at him, but he didn't mind. I'll always worry, Naruto. Dinner was a success in Naruto's book. The main course consisted of the standard bowl of rice accompanied by miso soup and 3 traditional sides, squid sashimi, grilled chicken, and steamed seasoned vegetables. They had the sweet red bean soup for dessert, which, to Naruto's delight, received much praise. Luckily for him, the strong smells around the kitchen had masked his surprise for Hinata. He left the table to withdraw the baking sheet from the oven, and when he presented the cinnamon rolls, Hinata's eyes lit up. Iruka could only laugh as she thanked Naruto, who looked simultaneously embarrassed and entirely too pleased with himself. Ah, Iruka sighed, stretching in his chair and patting his stomach. That might have been the best meal I've had in years. Thank you both very much. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Hinata said with a glowing smile as she and Naruto gathered the dishes. Before long they had all retired to the living room, relaxing for a while and talking about their days. It was as pleasant an evening as any of them could have asked for. I should get to bed, Iruka said after a time, covering a yawn with one hand. I need to be up to see you off in the morning before I head to the academy. Naruto and Hinata bid him a good night as he stepped to the door, though he paused for a moment and narrowed his eyes back at the pair. You'd better let him get enough sleep, Hinata. Her cheeks turned red even though she knew that his comment was made in jest, and she nodded dutifully. Good. Sleep well you too. Hinata and Naruto took care of the dishes before taking turns bathing, and it wasn't long before they had changed and were back in the now dark living room. His normal sleeping attire consisted of a simple t-shirt and a pair of shorts, while hers alternated between a nightgown and one similar to his own. Tonight she wore one of Naruto's shirts and a pair of capris, an outfit that she would never have dreamed of wearing in front of him even a few weeks prior. But as she curled up with him on the couch, it only felt comfortable. I'll miss you, Hinata said quietly after a long while, forcing herself not to feel terribly self-conscious about the simple statement. She wasn't about to let things go unsaid after all that had happened. She knew that it logically made sense to be honest, but it didn't stop her from fidgeting with his hand. It won't be for too long, he assured, though when she didn't respond for a few seconds he added, but I'll miss you, too. She bit her lip, closing her eyes and willing the harsh images away. I can't stop thinking about when you. Unable to finish the sentence, Hinata lapsed back into silence. Naruto pulled her a little closer, nuzzling the top of her head as it came to rest just below his chin. It'll be okay. I'll have Jiraiya-sensei with me all the time, too. But the Hokage said that Akatsuki might be looking for you. Isn't it unsafe for you to leave the village right now? I dunno, he shrugged. I mean, if they're as strong as he said they are, then they could probably get into the village anyway. At least this way I'll have one, maybe even two, of the Sannin nearby, right? I guess so. Nothing would convince her not to worry, but she did have to hold back a small laugh at a particular thought. I never thought about what having a Jinchuriki for a boyfriend would be like. She realized that living with this concern might have to be the norm, but at the same time she trusted and had confidence in Naruto. The nightmares of his death would go away eventually. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. It was a lively group that came to see Naruto off in the morning. Somebody had told Team Guy about it, and Tenten had taken it upon herself to inform the rest of their friends. All of the Konoha 12 were there, along with Haku, Kakashi, and Iruka. Neji even showed up, looking as somber as usual. Guys, it's not like I'm leaving for a really long time, Naruto laughed, rubbing at the back of his neck. What's with the send-off? Ino dragged Choji and me here, Shikamaru said dryly, earning a glare from the blonde girl. Is it not appropriate behavior to see a comrade off on a journey? Shino questioned, what could be seen of his face a blank mask. Yeah, Kiba and Sakura said together, staring daggers at one another a breath later. Do your best, Naruto-kun. Lee exclaimed, giving Naruto his signature gleaming smile and thumbs up. Oh, Lee, Tenten sighed, rolling her eyes. She smirked and draped her arms around Hinata's shoulders from behind, winking at Naruto. You'd better come home quick or somebody's gonna get lonely. Who knows? Maybe I'll see if she'll go out with me instead. Tenten-chan. Hinata squeaked, blushing furiously. Everybody, except for Sasuke and Shino, of course, laughed, which only made her more embarrassed. I'm just kidding. Everybody knows you two lovebirds are inseparable. That didn't do much to assuage Hinata's flush, but Tenten did let her go. Don't worry, Naruto, I'll make sure to take your place while you're gone. Platonically, of course. She afforded him another mischievous wink before Jiraiya cut in. Alright, that's enough of that, the Sannin scolded, turning towards the open gate. I want to make it to Shukuba by noon. Yes, sensei, Naruto said obediently. He did a half-turn to follow after, then stopped and glanced back at Hinata. She blinked at him, and his cheeks colored to match his new headband. He quickly mustered enough courage to step over and just barely brush his lips against her cheek, turning to sprint after Jiraiya before she could even react. All around her their friends whistled and cheered. It was a bit too much for the poor girl to handle. Whoa there! Tenten laughed, catching Hinata as she teetered backwards. The young Hyuga was practically glowing red. A small battle fan appeared in Tenten's hand in a puff of smoke, and she used it to coax some air towards Hinata. That's a little dramatic for a peck on your cheek. Besides, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. I'm not embarrassed, Hinata insisted feebly, straightening and trying to get a handle on the butterflies trying to escape her stomach. Sure, and I like wearing pink, Sasuke remarked coolly. Haku giggled, and even Kakashi cracked a small grin behind his mask. Hinata struggled to find an appropriate response, failed, then spun to lead the way stiffly out of the dispersing group. You guys are mean, Iruka chuckled. I take it there haven't been many public displays of affection between those two yet. More like none, Sasuke corrected, slipping his hands into his pockets and starting with his team back towards town. About all anybody's seen before today was the way their hands are constantly glued together. Somebody sounds jealous, Haku said mildly, earning him a flat look from his friend. He only smiled back innocently, though when Sasuke seemed to be looking past him he raised an eyebrow and turned to look as well. Team Guy was just disappearing around a corner, but Teammate was still sharing the street with them. Haku had to stop himself from frowning when he realized who Sasuke was looking at. Kakashi-senpai said we don't have to meet for training until 10 today. He made sure to keep his voice perfectly neutral. Since when did I cease being your instructor? Kakashi asked amusedly. Haku blanched and ducked his head, earning him a satisfied nod from his senpai. I'll meet you there, Sasuke said calmly, breaking away from the group. Neither Kakashi nor Haku glanced back or wondered what he was up to, but Iruka and Hinata both watched curiously as he approached Kurenai's team. Sakura spotted him on the way over and flushed lightly, excusing herself and breaking off to meet him. Not training this morning, Sasuke-kun, she said by way of greeting. Kakashi-sensei is meeting with some of the other Junin this morning, so we won't start until 10. Join me for a walk. Sakura nodded emphatically, clasping her hands behind her back and falling into step beside Sasuke. It was remarkable to her how natural such things had become in the short time since the second exam. They had only been on 2 dates, but they had also spoken a great deal more recently than ever before. How's your training going? She asked, walking with him towards a path that ran along the outer wall. If there was one thing he could always talk about, it was his training. Pretty well. Kakashi-sensei has had us training with genjutsu lately. More recently he's been making us learn how to break free of techniques that directly affect the mind, ones that make us physically incapable of forming hand seals. Like the binding technique. That was what we started with, but he's been using one of the demonic illusion ones, he calls it insanity. Sasuke blinked and looked around when he realized that Sakura was no longer next to him a few steps later. He looked back to find her staring at him, clearly aghast. I've seen Kurenai-sensei use that once, on one of our missions, she started, shivering at the recollection. 2 rogue shinobi attacked while we were doing routine border patrol. I don't think they were very strong, but sensei didn't take any chances. They killed each other, Sasuke offered blandly. Sakura shivered again. Yeah, one of them anyway. She finished off the other when the jutsu was released. Kakashi-sensei used that on you. He shrugged, nodding forward in an attempt to get her walking again. Only when her feet began to move did he respond, keeping his tone nonchalant. I think it was a milder form, but yeah. He used it on all of us at once and had us try to break it while fighting one another. He didn't let us get hurt, he added, noting the distressed expression she had taken on. I know all of the teams are training a lot harder since the exams, but that's pretty harsh, and he shouldn't expect Genin to be able to dispel it. Hinata and I can both do it now, and Naruto isn't far behind. Sakura balked and missed a step, and Sasuke misinterpreted it as her surprise at Naruto's lack of progress. Genjutsu is his weak point, so I don't expect him to ever be good at countering it. But at least the Kyuubi always lets him know if he's under an illusory technique. Right, the Kyuubi, she responded faintly, shaking her head. Shikamaru was right. You three are on a whole different level. I guess it makes sense, with your and Hinata's bloodlines and Naruto with that. Fox. It doesn't have anything to do with Kekkei Genkai or Biju. Sasuke's voice was firm, but not harsh. They'd been over this once before, and he knew she didn't mean anything by it. We've trained for most of our lives, harder than anybody else. The only difference between us and the rest of our peers is that we each have a drive that makes us want to be stronger. Doesn't everybody? The question from the kunoichi sounded patronizing, and once again Sasuke felt his patience being tested. He was reminded why the other dates hadn't really been fantastic. What's yours? He asked. I want to protect the village, Sakura answered almost immediately, putting in a more recent addition right after, and I want to be more useful to my team. I realized that I wasn't really ready to be a ninja after leaving the academy, and I need to make up for that. That's not a bad thing to want. Neither of those are. But, no offense, the first was just an automatic response, wasn't it? It's what we were taught in the academy. She opened her mouth to object, thought for a second, and then closed it again. He was right. And it's admirable that you want to be stronger for your team. That's how we all started. But we just call that friendship. Sakura blinked at him, not quite understanding the difference yet. Kurenai probably had you all state your goals on your first day as a team, right? She nodded, flushing. Sasuke had to stop himself from rolling his eyes. He had a pretty good idea what her goal had been back then. You didn't really have a true aim for your life at that point, did you? And do you now? Not really, I guess. I always thought that if I followed the lessons and did my duty as a shinobi, then that would be enough. Sasuke only shook his head, stopping on the bridge that Team 7 often used as a meeting spot. He leaned on the railing, looking down into the water. Sakura joined him after a moment, afraid to touch on the natural next topic. Itachi. She had asked as gently and as quietly as she could, but he still visibly tensed, then nodded. That was my first kick into serious training. The second was Naruto and Hinata, to be strong enough to protect them. She said nothing, waiting for the implied question to be answered. Sasuke smirked sideways at her. And their reasons aren't mine to share, although I'm pretty sure the whole village knows Naruto's from his antics years ago. To be the best Hokage there ever was, right? Sakura giggled, though her good humor died down almost as quickly as it came. I don't really know him very well. But he seems so confident all of the time. I can see why Hinata's always liked him, though he looks kind of scary now after what happened. He's still the same old Naruto. Loud, way too friendly, eternally optimistic, etc. Sasuke smiled despite himself. People have always thought poorly of him because of something he had no control over. After he and the Kyuubi saved the village last week, people only found new reasons to dislike him. But even if he can get annoying sometimes, he'd do anything for his friends, and for the village. I wish our team were as close as yours, Sakura sighed, flicking a splinter from the railing into the stream. Kiba and I only seem to argue all the time, and Shino isn't interested in much outside of his bugs, he hardly speaks most days. Kiba's an Inuzuka, and Shino's an Aburame. Did you expect them to be much different than their clans? I guess not. I just wish we could be a little closer, I suppose. How often do you train? Sasuke's question was a simple one, but Sakura raised an inquiring eyebrow. A few hours a day, then maybe a mission if there's one for us. Why? Sasuke shrugged, pushing off of the railing. Pretty much from the beginning of our time at the academy, the three of us have trained together. Not only that, but we all had reason to train for hours on end, every day. On off days we'd frequently go from dawn until dusk, only stopping for a few breaks to eat. But you all know that, so why do you wonder why we're so close? I'm sure if you tried cooperating with Kiba and engaging Shino in more conversations, they'd come around. When in doubt, you could always train more. His hands found his pockets and he began sauntering down the path again, followed closely by Sakura. She seemed a touch despondent after that, falling silent for a long while. Do you ever get jealous of Naruto and Hinata? She asked finally. How so? He knew. How so? But the question had to be asked for propriety's sake. You know. How so? She also knew that he knew. How so? Perhaps they had spent a bit too much time together lately. Not really, he shrugged. It wasn't something he wanted to talk about. But then, what had he intended to talk about when he had invited her on a walk? I don't mind giving them their alone time. I've got plenty of training to do, plus Haku's been getting pretty good at shogi and go. He's fun to hang out with. But you're not interested in that kind of thing. Here we go. What kind of thing? You can quit being coy any time, Sakura huffed, though she managed to do it in a manner that didn't seem haughty. Instead, it came off as somewhat playful. You've asked me on 2 dates now, and we've been talking more recently. You haven't thought about it at all. I think I liked it better when you were obsessive and clueless, Sasuke muttered, earning him a flat look. He put up his hands in a conciliatory gesture, shrugging immediately after and rubbing at the back of his neck. I guess so. I just can't see myself in that kind of relationship. Why not? Why not your face? I'm not exactly the touchy-feely type like those two are, and I'm not sure if you noticed, but I don't have the broadest range of expressions. Naruto likes to point out how dull I am at every opportunity. You don't have to be like them, or have the same kind of bond with somebody. And I don't think you're dull, she continued, and it was only when she had gotten fairly close that Sasuke realized that they had stopped at the center of the wooded path. I think you're just quiet, serious, and maybe a little cold, but I can tell by the way you care for your friends that you have a good heart. She came nearer still, allowing him to notice just how big and beautifully green her eyes were. You can't just lead a girl on and not expect her to get curious, Sasuke-kun. I'm not. He started, wondering where his usual insouciance had gone. He instinctively took a step back, but she countered with a step forward. His Sharingan activated of its own accord. He told himself it had nothing to do with his increased heart rate. This promenade was not going as planned. Or was it? He was second-guessing himself now, which was never a good sign. There was a strange sensation in his gut, something akin to fluttering. You're not? Sakura asked innocently, her face mere centimeters from his as she looked up into his eyes. For a long moment Sasuke just stared, dumbfounded at how he had been so boldly maneuvered into this position. It had been so smooth that he hadn't even noticed. Had she done it on purpose, or had the conversation just flowed in this direction? Her lips looked so enticing, and his head was feeling fuzzy. Fuck it. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. 2 cloaked figures stood overlooking Konoha, their faces shrouded by plain sugagasa tilted forward over their eyes. Their black cloaks shifted in the gentle breeze, and the red clouds adorning the garments seemed a little like the real thing. The taller of the pair wore a yellow ring on his left ring finger, over skin far too pallid and clammy to be normal. The other wore a similar piece on his right ring finger, its color a deep red. They stood atop the Hokage monument just above the Yondaime's stone face. The Kyuubi won't be easy to subdue, Itachi, the tall man droned in an odd accent, his voice a touch gravelly. He tilted his straw hat up a bit, squinting down and around at the city. From the looks of the village and the area to the north, I'd say the Jinchuriki really did transform. Could be dangerous. Perhaps, but if our information is accurate then we know how to engage him. Yeah, you and your eye tricks. Let's get going already. Samahata is getting hungry. Itachi said nothing, his impassive eyes gazing across the village, his old home. He lingered for a fraction of a second on the abandoned Uchiha compound, then vanished a second later. Kisame followed suit, holding a devious smile all the while. Akatsuki was on the hunt. Chapter 20. In pursuit. Hinata took in a deep, calming breath. A cool breeze played through the arching boughs of the nearby cherry trees, scattering more pink blossoms across the path in front of her. The sweet smell of flowers and earth filled her senses, soothing away anxiety. She heard the gate close behind her, but she remained still for a time. After a long moment she exhaled deeply, starting down the cobblestone walkway and towards the Hyuga estate, towards her father's home. Hinata-sama. A man gasped as the Hyuga heiress approached the main building. He nearly dropped the pitcher he had been carrying, hastily setting it down to slide open the door for her. Hiyashi-sama was not expecting you so soon. Please, come inside. Good afternoon, Ko-san, Hinata smiled, nodding her head as he bowed. It's good to see you again. Ko blinked and looked up at her, as if trying to figure out how to react to the friendly greeting. Could you tell my father that I'll be waiting for him in the dojo? Of course, Lady Hinata. He bowed once again, closing the door once she had stepped over the threshold. Hurried steps carried him away, though he cast several furtive glances back before the building was out of sight. Is that really the same girl? The dojo looked exactly as Hinata remembered it. The rosewood floors and wall panels gleamed in the faint light coming through the shaded windows, and the familiar scent of polish mixed with that of the cherry blossoms just outside. She clasped her hands in front of her, sifting through memories that started to spring up in the back of her mind. Hours, days, and weeks on end had been spent in this room, years of her life, all the while striving for her father's approval. Countless failures and few successes had been earned there. It was a place of harsh reminders, but ones that she no longer wished to forget. I am glad to see that you are doing well, Hinata. She forced herself not to tense when Hiyashi's voice drifted from the other side of the room. He had entered so quietly that she hadn't noticed his presence. Hinata turned gracefully and bowed, keeping herself relaxed despite the small knot in her stomach. Even though they had reconciled with one another, he was still her father and the Hyuga clan leader, and she was about to step out of place. Hiyashi-sama, she began reverently, lifting her eyes to meet his. To her surprise, he had a very small, fond smile tugging at his lips. Hiyashi had never been one to display emotion, even to his children. I have come on your invitation to discuss the matter of my rejoining the Hyuga clan as heiress. Hinata trailed off as her father chuckled softly, shaking his head and gesturing towards a dais on the far side of the room. It held the family's traditional armors and weapons, and nearest to them sat a platter with 2 cups and a small pot. There is no need to be so formal. Let us have some tea, and then we can talk. He glided over and lowered himself on one side of the refreshments, motioning for her to join him. Hinata moved to ease herself down across from him. She felt flustered, not sure what to make of Hiyashi now. It's been 7 months, he continued, his voice gentle and low. She didn't need to ask which event he was referring to. Much has changed since February, daughter. I have had time to reflect on the past, I have realized my shortcomings, and I have sought to mend and atone for them. I heard from the Hokage that you were re-examining our clan's laws, namely those regarding the branch house, Hinata ventured cautiously. Despite Hiyashi's invitation to speak casually and his apparent nonchalance, such matters had been taboo at one time. Old habits were difficult to break. I spoke to Neji after the invasion. I told him the truth about the branch family, and the true fate of his father, Hazashi. Have you spoken to him since? I have, she responded slowly. He shared the details of Hazashi-sama's sacrifice for the clan, and he told me that you plan to end the practice of applying the cursed seal. Hiyashi nodded solemnly, remaining silent for a time as he sipped from his steaming drink. I believe my brother would have wanted his son to know the truth eventually, and I know that he would have rejoiced knowing that the cursed seal will be done away with. Hinata inclined her head in agreement, sharing a smile with her father. Much has changed, and will continue to change. I must assume that you have come to your decision, he said after a moment, setting his cup down and folding his arms. Unless you came only to have a drink, I could not be upset with my daughter for simply coming to visit. I have made my choice, yes, though it is one of compromise. Hiyashi nodded, and she got the feeling that he had been expecting this all along. I would like to accept your invitation to return to my position as heiress, but I would also like to remain with Naruto and Iruka sensei for the time being. A bit of wistfulness was visible in his eyes for an instant, quickly replaced by acceptance and serenity. If that is your condition, I gladly welcome you. You are an adult now, and as such may go and stay where you wish. I only ask that you come to train with Neji and Hanabi when you are able. The formal responsibilities will be there as always, but I expect you considered that already. I will represent the Hyuga where I am needed, of course, Hinata agreed, struggling to keep a playful grin from her face. Just promise not to schedule too many occasions that require my presence, else I may turn rebellious. We could not have that. Now, Hiyashi commented seriously, hiding his own smirk. They will be kept to a minimum, I promise. I will send a courier to inform you well in advance should such an event arise. He rose with a contented sigh, chuckling again and shaking his head. You have grown so much over such a short time, Hinata. I am proud of you. Hinata wasn't sure what to say or how to react. Never in her life had she heard those words from her father, and never had he spoken with such sincerity. Tears formed at the corners of her eyes, heedless of her will, and she had to restrain herself from rushing to embrace him. Instead, she stepped forward, hugging her father as calmly as she could manage and holding on for several seconds. She took a deep, shuddering breath before breaking contact, looking up to see similarly teary eyes looking down at her. We will have a celebration next week, Hiyashi coughed after a minute, gathering his composure. Naruto and Sasuke are welcome, of course, as are Kakashi and Iruka. Thank you, father. He smiled and nodded. Nothing else needed to be said. They walked together from the dojo, Hiyashi escorting his daughter to the estate's entrance. He watched as she made her way back towards the town center, thinking about just how much Hinata was starting to resemble her late mother, both in appearance and in spirit. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Kakashi wasn't at the bridge when Hinata arrived. In the past it would have been normal for their instructor to be late, but since they had begun their new training regimen he had been early every day. Haku and Sasuke greeted her as usual, but neither had a clue where the Jonin was. It's still a few minutes until 10, Sasuke shrugged, leaning against the railing. I'm sure he'll be here. He was really keen to have us master freeing ourselves from insanity. I think that ended up a lot deeper than you intended, Haku pointed out with a grin. The Uchiha gave him flat look, though he couldn't help but smirk after a few seconds. Oh, how'd your stroll with Sakura go? Sasuke had to stop himself from scowling. We just talked about training, he replied half honestly. I can have girls as friends without any weird motives. Right, Hinata. Of course you can, though I have a strange feeling that Sakura isn't just your friend anymore, she said cryptically, tapping at her jawline in exaggerated thought. Yeah, you could say that it's written all over you, Haku put in, scratching pensively at his neck. I just can't figure out what it is, though. Sasuke eyed his friends warily at first, but it didn't take long for him to put it together. Realization dawned when he mimicked Haku, reaching up to touch his neck. He muttered a curse, and the other two burst into laughter. I never expected Sakura to be so aggressive, Hinata got out between fits of giggles. You can't even hide them all behind your collar, Haku teased. Sasuke-kun, are you blushing? They're just hickeys. I bet you leave worse on Naruto every day. Sasuke scowled fiercely now, tugging up the high collar of his shirt in vain. If I did, nobody would ever find out, Hinata said, donning a mischievous smile even as she flushed. He heals too fast. Whatever. He muttered, rubbing at his neck in irritation. All right, so we talked, and we did a bunch of kissing. Happy. She raised an eyebrow at him, as if to say, go on. Sasuke rolled his eyes. We're not together. We're not anything. We just got a little carried away this one time, is all, he finished lamely, reddening a bit even as he glowered. If you say so, Haku chimed. He wasn't exactly glad to hear the news, but neither could he convince himself to be down about it. Though Sasuke was being difficult, he could tell that his friend wasn't unhappy. I can be happy for him, too. They continued to banter for another 15 minutes before it became apparent that Kakashi was not going to be anywhere near on time. They lapsed into an uncomfortable silence, looking around warily. It was then that they began to notice that something was off. It was a little too quiet, or perhaps too still. It wasn't something any of them could explain, but it was something they all knew. Let's go look for Kakashi-sensei, Sasuke said quietly. Hinata and Haku only nodded, following as he leapt from the bridge and started back towards town. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I never thought you'd show your face here again, Itachi. Kakashi's tone was casual, almost bored, but it held a certain iciness that wasn't usually present. He stood at the center of a path by the river, barring the way from two cloaked figures. The Uchiha only watched him with impassive eyes, but his companion smirked and spoke up. Copy Ninja Kakashi, I presume, Kisame drawled. Or would you prefer Kakashi of the Sharingan? Whichever suits your fancy, Hoshigaki Kisame. The man's malicious grin widened. I am a shinobi of the leaf, in any event, and you both are S-rank missing nin and wanted criminals. I'll be taking you down now. You seem confident that you can accomplish such a feat, Itachi said quietly, his crimson eyes emotionless as they watched Kakashi lift the forehead protector from his hidden Sharingan. We are not here to start a fight, Kakashi. But if you seek one with us, we will surely finish it. Let me take him, Itachi, Kisame offered. I've wanted to fight against the infamous Sharingan for some. He was cut off a breath later when a viridian blur collided with the side of his head, sending him flying through the air and crashing down into the water. Konoha Senpu. Guy roared, spinning away from his kick and landing next to Kakashi. It looks like you were right about them, Kakashi. Yo, Guy, Kakashi responded placidly, not taking his eyes off of the Uchiha. Did you want to take the slimy one? I think I'm better suited for Itachi. He reached to his kunai holster, withdrawing a knife and spinning it on one finger. Besides, I'd like to get some answers from him. Yosh. The eccentric Jonin said no more, bounding towards where Kisame had already recovered. Their clash was loud and violent, but neither Itachi nor Kakashi moved or took their eyes from one another. For several tense seconds they were still, even as the air around them began to grow heavy and crackle with energy. Without warning their hands shot up simultaneously, weaving hand seals so fast that only a Sharingan could have followed. Kaden. Great fireball. They said in unison, and a beat later two massive spheres of fire collided between them. The resulting explosion released enough energy to push both of them back, and the nearby trees shuddered and swayed dangerously. But neither was finished just yet. Sweden. Water Dragon. Twin serpents shot from the water off to one side, twisting and clashing above them before the flames from the previous jutsu had even died out. Water cascaded down like rain, soaking everything in the vicinity. Doden. Earthen Spear. The ground in front of each shinobi churned and erupted outward, ejecting a shaft of stone that shot forward. They passed within centimeters of one another. Kakashi and Itachi mirrored one another's movements, pivoting one foot and allowing the lance to fly by within a hair's breadth of their chests. A kunai appeared at Kakashi's neck, and without hesitation it ripped backwards at the Jonin's exposed throat even as Itachi said, a stolen Sharingan cannot best the genuine article. Kakashi's body fell to the ground, but as it hit the stones below it turned to water and splashed outward. A ball of lightning tore through Itachi's chest a split second later. Kakashi stood behind his adversary, his arm extended into Itachi's back with lightning from his rapier arcing all around his bloodied fist. Do not underestimate me, Itachi, Kakashi growled, wrenching his fist back. The sanguine liquid on his hand disappeared almost immediately, and what he had thought to be Itachi's body writhed and broke apart into a murder of crows. The black birds shrieked and frantically took to the sky, fading away quickly. The rogue Uchiha stood where he had started their encounter, as placid and calculating as ever. I'm impressed that you are able to use your Sharingan to such an extent, Itachi offered mildly. But this conflict will draw attention that we do not desire. I apologize, but this must be finished quickly. Kakashi had no time to react. Itachi blinked once, and his eyes had changed. The normal design of the Sharingan had shifted in an instant, and the red of his iris was now overlaid with what looked like a black three-pointed shuriken. Tsukuyomi. Crap. I can't, it was already too late. Every natural color faded to black, white, or a faded gray, and ominous black clouds shifted past the dark red moon in the crimson sky above. It took Kakashi a second to realize that he was bound and suspended on a T-shaped wooden post, helpless to move. Itachi stood in front of Kakashi, his expressionless features dimmed by the strange dimension. He held a plain katana in his right hand, pointed at his captive's torso. I control time in this realm. On the outside, a mere second may pass while 72 hours go by here. You will spend what feels to be an eternity exactly where you are, and you will experience pain unlike any you have ever known. The tip of his sword pierced cleanly through Kakashi's flak jacket, sinking slowly into his flesh. There is no escape to this technique. You will suffer here, and you will break here. I told you not to underestimate me, Kakashi grunted, gritting his teeth through the pain. A second Itachi appeared next to the first, lifting a new blade and plunging it into his side. He gasped, coughing up blood. Each foe Uchiha withdrew his katana, only to stab again, and again, and again. Kakashi wasn't sure how long it went on. All he could see was red, and pain coursed through every nerve in his body. It all ended suddenly, however, and even the pain disappeared as if it had never been. But he remembered it vividly, and looking down now at the veritable army of Itachi clones that had appeared, he knew that this was only the beginning. That was 1 second that you just experienced within my Tsukuyomi. You have 259,199 seconds left. I will make sure to keep track for you, lest you forget. And so he did. The torture continued for an untold amount of time, and the only way Kakashi knew how many instances he had been through was by Itachi's diligent recitation of the remaining time. It wasn't until after nearly 60,000 agonizing seconds that a something changed. As darkness closed in following a particularly gruesome ordeal, one that left strips of mangled flesh hanging from every visible portion of his body, Kakashi noted the faintest ripple within his mind. I didn't think you'd fall for this, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi's eyes snapped open after the most recent reset to find Sasuke standing beneath him, facing Itachi. His student held himself stiffly, and he was staring hard at his long-lost older brother. Sasuke, the Jonin breathed, disbelieving. How did you? You trained me to use these eyes, he responded tightly, still not looking back at his crucified instructor. I stepped into your consciousness, and into the Tsukuyomi. I'm getting you out. Sasuke reached forward with one hand, bringing it down in a simple vertical chop. A jagged tear appeared in the air in front of him, and he reached to dig his fingers into it. With a grunt he tore a gap in the space, which began to widen rapidly on its own. The world that Itachi had created shimmered and dissolved, and Kakashi felt a terrible wrenching feeling as he was forcibly brought back to reality. The first things he saw when he came back to himself were Sasuke's eyes, though only for an instant as the boy flew in front of him. Itachi came back into view a second later, his eyes slightly narrowed but still looking as collected as ever. Can you stand on your own, sensei? Haku asked. Kakashi blinked and looked down, realizing that Haku and Hinata were supporting his weight. Sasuke now stood in front of him, facing Itachi with clenched fists. Electricity was already beginning to crackle around his left hand. I'm fine, Kakashi assured them, regaining his feet. Although I'm not sure I would have been if you all hadn't shown up. Thank you, Sasuke. Uchiha Itachi, Sasuke ground out, his face contorted into a snarl as he stared down the man that had taken his whole life away. Little brother, Itachi responded quietly, his Sharingan fading. I see you have refuted my advice. I've hated you for every second of every day. I've lived and trained for my revenge. Even if that were so, you'll never be able to kill me at your level. That was a fact. Sasuke knew it logically, but his body didn't seem to care. Every fiber of his being ached to spring forward and attack, to finally take this chance to avenge his slaughtered clan, to gain justice for his parents' cruel murder. Logic battled with seething, roiling anger, and it lost. Dark indigo chakra exploded around Sasuke as he tore forward, heedless of the shouts from his friends and mentor. The only thing he could think about was ripping Itachi apart, and all he could see was his brother standing in front of him, silently daring him to advance. The curse mark broke from its binding at Sasuke's will, flaring out and covering his limbs and face. Malevolent energy burned all around him, and the unbridled fury emanating from the young Uchiha was palpable. He would use every scrap of power he had, no matter the cost. Itachi moved to casually turn aside the first powerful punch from Sasuke, shifting his weight to flow out of the way from another that came a fraction of a second later. Sasuke's movements could only be seen as a blur, but his brother seemed to move faster and with significantly less effort. Every action was calculated, like he could see through everything. At least, He could until Sasuke's fist smashed into the side of his head. Kisame and Guy's fight was interrupted when Itachi collided with his ally, sending them both careening into the water several meters away. Sasuke stood where his brother had been, along with a clone that was drawing back its fist. The Bunshin had appeared between one blink and the next, blindsiding the missing nin. I didn't anticipate that you would be able to pull off such a complicated maneuver, Itachi said as he slowly stood by his grumbling partner. You managed to bypass my illusion, use a subtle one of your own to mask your hand seals, and summon a clone in my blind spot. I'm glad that your potential was not squandered. He twitched one of his hands, and several dozen crows flowed from his robe. A heartbeat later they fell to the ground, each one impaled with a single chakra sanban. His eyes fell on Hinata, and he tilted his head to one side. She's an interesting one as well. A ring of fire sprang up around his and Kisami's feet just before the water around them froze, leaving two small circles of liquid amid the now icy river. Haku stood next to Guy, his hands to the water. Icicles shot from below, but they evaporated as they came close to Itachi's jutsu. He's not here, Kisame. I believe we should look elsewhere. And I was just starting to enjoy myself, the taller man sighed, shouldering his massive weapon. He swung at once, catching a giant blast of flames from Sasuke and causing it to dissipate almost immediately. I suppose if we stay too long things will get a little too interesting, though. He grinned and turned his back on the group. Itachi mirrored him, and then they were simply gone. The protective flames vanished, and ice quickly invaded the empty circles. How dare you run? Sasuke roared, casting around wildly. Come back and fight. Sasuke, Kakashi said in a low, dangerous tone. The Uchiha growled and rounded on the man, but stopped in his tracks when he saw that Hinata and Haku were standing there as well. The older boy looked worried, and Hinata seemed to share his overt concern. Guy idled nearby, keeping a careful eye on him. Sasuke looked down at himself, muttered a few choice words, then closed his eyes and focused. It took a visible effort, but Orochimaru's cursed seal gradually receded, the symbols flowing back from his body and into the mark on his neck. The purple chakra faded, leaving him feeling nauseous. You said. I know what I said, Sasuke snapped, clenching his fists and turning his back to them. I couldn't stop myself. Kakashi watched his student for a moment before he nodded, sighing tiredly. I know. We have more pressing concerns right now besides. Guy, he continued, turning to his friend, I need you to tell the Hokage what's happened. Tell him that Akatsuki, specifically Kisame and Itachi, are going after Naruto, and that Team 7 is in pursuit. Be careful, Guy said in an uncharacteristically serious tone. He bounded away without another word, and Kakashi was already turning towards the east. Let's go. Jiraiya and Naruto will have made it to Shukuba by now. We're going to be traveling at top speed. There was no time for questions. Sasuke, Haku, and Hinata fell silently into formation around Kakashi as he took off, and the four of them quickly became blurs that shot through the front gates and into the trees beyond. Their collective worry was for Naruto, though each had to avoid glancing apprehensively at Sasuke. Haku's brow was knitted in concentration, and Hinata was biting hard at her lower lip. Kakashi's Hitai-8 was still raised, and both eyes were narrowed ahead. Priority is securing Naruto and preventing any casualties. Understand. Sasuke said nothing, though his teammates both made affirming sounds. Sasuke, is your revenge prioritized over your friends' lives? The boy ground his teeth and still said nothing, but Kakashi had made what point he could. Hold out until we get there, Naruto. We're on our way. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. This town is weird, Naruto mused aloud, staring up at a sign that read, Fun Fun Avenue. Why are we stopping by a place like this, again? Tsunade could be anywhere, Jiraiya responded jovially, making his way onto the new street with no small amount of gusto. This town is well known for its entertainment, and she's well known for her gambling. Yeah, you told me that, but this looks like a place for you to do research, sensei. During training before the final Chunin exam, Naruto had sought out Jiraiya to show him that he had mastered the Rasengan, only to find out what the Sanin's expeditions had really been about. The memory of the esteemed sage crouching by a hole in the wall of the women's bathing area was burned into his mind forever. Are we here just so you can do perverted things? Of course not. Tsunade very well could be here, he responded defensively. If a few beautiful women happen to fall for my charm and good looks while we're in town, then it is no fault of mine. Naruto sighed. How long will it take to look everywhere? Oh, it could take all night, Jiraiya responded, massaging his chin as if seriously considering it. We'd better get a room at an inn, just to be safe. I'll give you some training exercises to do and I'll go search for Tsunade. When Naruto only gave him a flat look, he sighed, turning into a ritzy-looking place. Naruto, we're on a special mission for the Sandaime. Do you think I'd go off and do frivolous things? Probably, the boy retorted honestly. You're not the most responsible ninja I've met. Whatever happened to respecting your elders? The Sannin muttered before paying the innkeeper. If I teach you one of your dad's jutsu, will you cut me some slack? Naruto brightened up almost immediately, and Jiraiya grinned. Ever wonder why he was called the Yellow Flash? It was because he moved faster than lightning, isn't it? The blonde said excitedly, following his sensei to their room. I knew it was possible, I just didn't know how. For all intents and purposes, it's very possible. Jiraiya unlocked and opened the door to their room, setting his pack down and stretching. Ah, that's better. Now, while I'm out looking for Tsunade, I want you to practice something. He reached into his satchel, rummaging around for a few seconds before withdrawing a pad of paper, an inkwell, and a brush. I thought I was going to be training, Naruto said, looking at the items dubiously. This is training, Jiraiya huffed, setting the writing utensils down at the desk by the door. If I'm going to be teaching you Minato's signature technique, it's going to take a lot of work to get you ready to start using it, understand? Naruto nodded slowly, shrugging out of his own backpack. Good, now have a seat here. The jutsu I'm going to be teaching you is called the Hiraishin no Jutsu. In short, it's a space-time ninjutsu that allows you to transport yourself from one location to another instantly. However, he went on, emphasizing his words. Like all space-time abilities, it is extremely dangerous to try it without extensive practice, research, and training first. If you want to learn this jutsu, you have to promise me right now that you will not try to use it before I give you permission. I'm serious about this, Naruto, it could kill you. I promise, Naruto assured, trying to control his anticipation. Hundreds of applications for such a technique were racing through his mind. It sounded almost too good to be real. That's my dad. Alright then. The first part is figuring out your personal seal. The Hiraishin requires that you have a point of reference, a specific location that you're trying to get to. This comes in the form of a jutsu formula. It's a seal, simply put. But each person's seal is going to be unique to them. If more than one person could use the ability, but their seals were the same, then it could get difficult to identify your own reference points. Still following? Naruto nodded eagerly, and Jiraiya couldn't help but smirk. Since that's the case, you need to create your own seal. You had classes on Jutsu Shiki at the academy, so you should know the symbols at least. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it does have to have meaning to you, and I'd say the simpler the better. So I can make anything I want? Naruto asked, clearly puzzled. If I have to make a formula every time I want to use the technique, isn't that kinda inconvenient? It would be, if not for the reason that I told you to make it simple. Watch. Jiraiya reached in front of Naruto and placed a finger on the paper, and almost immediately it looked like black ink was leaking from his fingertip. A few seconds later Naruto was looking down at a small seal, one of 3 concentric circles with 3 lines crossing through and intersecting at the center. How? That's the next part of the training, Jiraiya continued, nodding to the brush and ink. First you need to create your seal. After that, you'll need to learn how to create it using your chakra. That we'll cover later, though. Why can't you show me now? I don't think it's going to take long to make a little mark. Don't take this lightly, Naruto, he said sternly. I said it has to mean something to you so that you can feel a connection to it with your chakra. You may be able to use the jutsu with any old seal, but using one that you identify with is much more effective. I think I get it, Naruto said after a moment, staring down at the paper. I'll try to think of a good seal. Will you teach me to make it like you did later? Of course, but make sure you work hard on it first. I'll be back tonight after I've searched the town. Keep the door locked, and don't answer it unless you hear me give you the password. You remember what it is? Naruto rubbed at his temples, turning a little red. Naruto's fiery passion for Hyuga Hinata knows no bounds, he mumbled. Jiraiya let out a hearty laugh before bidding him farewell. Naruto locked the door behind him, shaking his head at the ridiculous password his instructor had come up with. It was just a kiss on her cheek. Dunno why he has to tease me about it all day. He grumbled some more before dropping back into the chair, trying to clear his mind and focus on the task at hand. Something with meaning. Nearly an hour later, Naruto had made little progress. Crumpled balls of paper lay scattered around the room, covered front and back by innumerable sigils, scripts, and designs. He was on the last page of the notepad, tapping the end of his calligraphy brush against the inkwell when a knock sounded at the door. Probably housekeeping. I doubt he's back this early. Who is it? Surprisingly, Jiraiya's muffled voice came from the other side of the door. It's me. Open the door, kid. Password. Naruto's fiery passion for Hinata knows no bounds. Naruto blinked, then stood up to unlock the door. The moment it was open, a hand shot through, grabbing his neck and lifting him from the ground. He gasped and struggled, clawing at the offending limb. Two strange shinobi stood on the other side of the door, wearing matching cloaks and looking dangerous. You got the password wrong, Kisame sighed at Itachi, stepping past the struggling boy. He's already gone. The Sanin's mind was closely guarded, Itachi replied calmly, crushing his victim's neck. The fake Naruto disappeared in a cloud of smoke. The room was empty, and the window on the far wall was open. Let's go. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Akatsuki, Naruto grunted, speeding over the rooftops. Those are the cloaks that Jiraiya-sensei warned me about. You're lucky he got your girlfriend's name wrong, else we may have already been captured. If they're as skilled as we've been told, though, you don't have long before they catch up. I know. By the way, what's with this thing you've got going on? There are two of us here, Kurama stated wryly. I hear everything you're told, too. Ooh. Anyway, I'll just head to that street and start looking in the gambling places. He won't be there. Find the red light district. But he said, kid, trust me on this one. This is Jiraiya we're talking about, and I've known his habits longer than you have. Kushina used to scold him for being the lecher that he is. Do you really think he's going to pass up on the chance to get some? Okay, I'm going to need to have a talk with him about that. The QB snorted before settling back to wait in the recesses of Naruto's mind. Shukuba wasn't very difficult to navigate, especially from the rooftops. There was one main avenue that held the inns that the town was famous for, and then only a handful of other populated streets. The moment Naruto spotted a sign that read, "The Traveler's Pleasure," he knew that he was in the right place. It was then, however, that something huge and jagged smashed into his side. With a pained gasp, Naruto was knocked from the air and sent crashing into the side of the nearest building. He managed to correct his course and hit the wall with his feet, splintering the wood but keeping his footing. Blood dripped steadily from a fresh wound, and while it wasn't deep, there were at least a dozen punctures around his ribcage. Careful not to kill him, Kisame, Itachi chided as they appeared on the street below, his eyes on Naruto. Jinchuriki Uzumaki Naruto. I will ask only once. Surrender without resistance, or we will resort to lethal force. So they don't want me dead. That's comforting. Naruto's skin was already sealing over the injury from Kisame's sword. He quickly assumed a low taijutsu stance, facing the pair below. They're after my power, remember. They can't have it if you're dead. I guess that works in our favor, right? Naruto almost grinned, but he was too busy tapping into the QB's chakra. He pulled as much as he could, the cloak springing to life around him immediately. The two tails twitched restlessly behind him, a third continuously half-forming and dispersing every few seconds. You'd better feel this, sensei. I believe you're best suited for this, Itachi offered to his partner, who gladly stepped forward. Samahata says that his chakra tastes interesting. Let's shave off a little of that shroud at a time, shall we? The few pedestrians nearby screamed and fled as Kisame charged, brandishing his gigantic sword. Naruto kicked off of the wall, rocketing away as fast as he could. The Kyuubi's chakra allowed him to move at incredible speeds, but his pursuer was swifter. Kisame swung Samahata, timing his own leap and the swing to catch the boy's ankles. Naruto pulled his knees up and somersaulted, landing on the roof opposite his starting point and bounding away at a breakneck pace. That blade grazed your foot, Kurama growled. It took a chunk of my chakra with it, which explains what he said. Samahata must be the name of the sword. Great. So it eats chakra. Naruto spared a glance towards his foot as he flew through the city, noting that there was a section of the chakra cloak missing that was taking far too long to refill. So don't get hit by that. It's generally considered a bad idea to get hit with swords, yes, but this one especially. Of all the times to be a smartass. He kicked off of another building, spinning and racing through hand seals. Futon. Vacuum sphere. Bolts of air shot towards the two chasing him, though they may as well not have been there for all they slowed the Akatsuki members down. The distance between them was closing rapidly, but Naruto could see the edge of the village ahead now. Just a little further. He cleared the last building a moment later, continuing another few dozen meters before making his move. There was no way to escape 2S rank missing Nin, he knew, so his best option would be to survive until Jiraiya got there. Naruto sped forward, disappearing into the forest. Out of sight for only a few seconds, he grit his teeth and caught hold of a branch, using his momentum to spin around it and send himself flying back in the direction he had come from. A clone accompanied him now, and an instant later Itachi and Kisame burst through the canopy. Rasengan. Naruto bellowed in unison with the Bunshin. The two spheres of concentrated chakra reached their targets at the same time, leaving little room for either of them to dodge. Their reactions were incredible, however, and it was easy to see why these two shinobi were so feared. Kisame intercepted the clone's Rasengan with Samahata, and even though the chakra was absorbed he was thrown off course by the impact. Naruto's attack hit Itachi directly in the chest, but the Uchiha's body erupted in a cloud of smoke as soon as it made contact. The real Itachi sword passed, having created and switched places with his shadow clone in less time than Naruto could even process the realization. This is bad, Naruto muttered internally as he landed on the forest floor, whirling to face his enemies. I can't outrun them. Then you're going to have to fight with everything you have. If you haven't noticed, they've handled everything I've done like it was nothing. They're so fast I can hardly keep track of them. I said everything you have, Naruto. You can't be serious. Itachi and Kisame landed a ways in front of him, the latter readying himself for another round. You only told that was possible last week, and you think I should just do it without ever trying it before. No, that'd be foolish, he said mildly. Just put me in control, and I'll do it. What? Are you joking? Kisame blurred and came at him, moving with startling agility and precision for someone with such a large weapon. It was all that Naruto could do to stay out of the path of the blade, but even that wasn't enough. Here and there bits of Kurama's chakra were eaten away, and if he wasn't mistaken the sword seemed to be growing larger. There aren't any serious repercussions, and you're outmatched here. They're both faster than you, this one is far better at taijutsu than you, and Itachi could kill you with his Sharingan and make it look like child's play. I'll return you to your consciousness after the fight, however it turns out. I'm not even sure it will be enough, but it's your best bet. Naruto remained in a tense silence for a time, and it wasn't until a slash from Samahata took out a large swath of chakra from his chest that he relented. Fine, do it. Giving Kurama control of his body came with an odd sensation. One moment he was flipping back to avoid a feinted kick, and in the next the world seemed to be collapsing into a circle at the center of his vision. Once everything settled, it felt like he was watching the scene through frosted glass from far away, though he was still able to make out what was going on. Kisame, back, Itachi warned, though not in time to stop his ally from taking one last swing with Samahata. Instead of trying to avoid it, however, Naruto stood his ground and reached up to intercept the blow. He caught the blade with one hand. What the? Kisame growled, trying to rip the sword away. It wouldn't budge. A wicked grin spread across Naruto's shadowed features, and when he looked up the man balked. The boy's eyes were empty white spheres, practically glowing with a light of their own. His skin began peeling away, large pieces simply tearing off and disintegrating. A dark, dense layer of chakra coursed underneath, and after a few seconds it enveloped him completely. It was completely unlike the lighter red-orange of the Kyuubi's cloak. This was of the deepest reds, and it flowed over him like a living entity, covering his clothes and becoming an extension of his body. When it finally settled, the thing holding Kisami's sword was no longer Uzumaki Naruto. It was a being of pure chakra, with malevolent white eyes and a body and limbs elongated to resemble the tailed beast within. 3 fully formed tails swished behind him, eager for what was to come. Greetings, Akatsuki. Kurama's voice was grating and distorted through Naruto's vocal cords, but it was unmistakably his. Time to even the odds a little. He flicked his wrist, and the simple action sent Kisame and his sword skidding across the forest floor. The man slammed into a tree with a grunt, glaring at the transformed Jinchuriki. It seems our information was flawed, Itachi reasoned. I will assist you in capturing him. Best of luck. Without warning, Naruto lurched forward, limbs stretching impossibly and shooting out to rake at his opponents. His tails followed suit, their sizes distorting and flailing to the sides as his enemies narrowly avoided the first attack. One caught Itachi and sent him crashing to the ground, while the other was deflected by Kisame. The third channeled a pinprick of chakra and launched it at the swordsman. The minuscule Bijudama exploded on contact with Samahata, sending its bearer flying through the nearest tree and smashing into the next. S-rank criminals ought to put on a better show. Sweden. Water shockwave. Kisame shouted. An enormous surge of water burst into the air from where he had fallen, flowing over the area in seconds. The technique flattened the surrounding landscape, trees and all. Sweden. Weighted water, Itachi murmured. Sweden. Water fang. Kurama's ersatz body became heavy and sluggish, even more so than it should have been in the water. In seconds he was being bombarded by jets and spirals of water from every direction. Sharks appeared out of nowhere, circling in and attempting to rip at his limbs. Pitiful. Raw power blasted outward, destroying the summoned sharks and creating a small crater below. The water churned and rushed outward, and the resulting flood flattened another broad section of woodland. Kurama landed on the ruined ground in front of his adversaries, floating atop the forest-turned swamp. We're not getting very far fighting this way, Itachi, Kisame sighed. The Kyuubi's eyes narrowed as he shifted Samahata to his left hand. The handle writhed and snaked up his arm, disappearing into his sleeve. Combating a monster requires that we become monsters as well. Kisami's skin paled further before it began stretching and distorting. Samahata crept up his arm, sinking into his skin and becoming one with the increasingly shark-like ninja. I agree. We should end this quickly. The tomo of Itachi's Sharingan merged with the pupil, forming his Mangekyo. Susanoo. Pale yellow chakra wrapped around the Uchiha, swiftly surrounding him and spreading outward. An ethereal ribcage coalesced around Itachi's body, and from it spawned a skeletal head and arms made from the same amber energy. The newly created chakra being loomed 5 or 6 times its summoner's height, and its hollow eye sockets glowed a bright gold. Excellent. Kisame brought his hands together in a ram's seal, taking in a deep breath. Sweden. Great water. For the second time that day he was knocked from his feet, and he grunted as yet another tree was felled by his spinning body. A long tongue lashed back from whence it came, retracting into the mouth of a toad that landed next to Kurama. Sorry I'm late, Jiraiya yawned, rubbing at the back of his neck. A bit of color in his cheeks indicated that he was already a little intoxicated. I was investigating a place on the other side of town. What's with the new look? Bullshit, Kurama growled, not taking his eyes from the Akatsuki members. And Naruto can tell you about it after we deal with them. The Sannin tensed as he realized what had happened, and he sobered almost immediately. Itachi's Susanoo and Kisami's transformation were enough to worry about without considering the Kyuubi taking over Naruto's mind. This gets more troublesome by the minute, Kisame scowled, cracking his neck and eyeing the large toad Jiraiya stood upon. Were the others this difficult? You handle Jiraiya. I'll get the Jinchuriki, Itachi said shortly, starting to look annoyed. Before he could make a move, however, he was forced to use Susanoo to guard himself against a barrage of lightning, fire, ice, and bolts of chakra that appeared out of nowhere. Kakashi, Sasuke, Haku, and Hinata landed a beat later on Naruto's other side, all crouched and ready for a second round. Tisk. They swarm like insects. Kisame grinned, lifting himself from the ground. He hadn't avoided the attacks, but the many wounds that had been caused by the brief flurry were already almost gone. Samahata would like to thank you for the feast. Still, he trailed off, making a show of counting the number of opponents. A Sannin, a Jinchuriki, the copy ninja, and 3 more annoying runts. 6 against 2 is hardly fair. Itachi. The elder Uchiha said nothing, his eyes locked on those of his brother. The light from Susanoo quickly diminished, and after a moment Itachi's Sharingan faded altogether. Never rest at ease, Uzumaki Naruto, he cautioned, turning his back to the group in a grand display of nonchalance. Nor you, Kyubi no Kitsune. Itachi. Sasuke yelled, springing forward as he had the time before. Kisame laughed, pivoting to follow after his partner. A bright orange light flared in Sasuke's right palm as he lunged at Itachi's back, but the instant before he would have made contact the two were gone. The boy landed hard, sending muddy water spraying in every direction as he howled at the empty horizon. His rage rapidly turned into agony, and he fell to his knees only to slam his fist into the ground. The flames that had been flickering in his hand erupted to one side, incinerating the closest tree stump and sending a cloud of steam billowing into the air. He stayed like that, fingers digging into the ground as he fought with his fury and anguish. Naruto says to go ahead, Kurama sighed in a low, guttural growl. Haku and Hinata started at the disturbing, almost disembodied voice. He'll be there shortly. They each recognized the Kyubi's tone, nodded, and then moved to Sasuke's side. Care to tell me what form you've taken on? Jiraiya asked, dismissing his summon and landing beside the transformed Naruto. The cloak of chakra wasn't enough to keep him alive against these two until help arrived, the fox stated plainly, lowering himself to the ground cross-legged. He's not capable of using this form without going instantly berserk, so he relinquished control to me for the time being. You two can just switch whenever you feel like it now. Kakashi seemed genuinely perplexed, and almost affronted. It was just too strange an idea. For the most part, something changed about the seal after Suna's invasion, and it seems I can take a more active role now. And no, he continued, closing his eyes and beginning to concentrate. I can't come out fully again. Not yet, at least. Kurama's cryptic words left Jiraiya and Kakashi feeling a little uneasy, but there were more pressing concerns for the time being. The flowing red chakra receded slowly into Naruto, revealing his body again. It was a jarring sight, to say the least. While his features were normal, his skin took a moment to start regrowing. This hurts, Naruto groaned, grinding his teeth. I warned you. Better to regrow some skin than be captured, though. I guess so. Thanks, Kurama. A satisfied growl was the Kyubi's only response. After a long and very painful few seconds, Naruto finally opened his eyes. He didn't even look aside at either of his sensei. Instead he rose and rushed over to his friend, concern evident in his expression. We weren't fast enough, Sasuke was saying when Naruto arrived. He was still on his hands and knees, staring at the ground as if lost. We got here as quickly as we could, Sasuke, Haku soothed, one hand on his friend's shoulder. Hinata knelt beside him, heedless of the mud soiling her clothes. We got here in time, she said softly, touching his arm. If we hadn't arrived when we did, Naruto might have already been taken. You guys really did save my ass there. Naruto walked to his friends, giving Hinata a small smile before crouching in front of Sasuke. He extended his hand to where it could be seen by the other boy. Sasuke. Don't say it, the Uchiha ground out, holding back bitter tears. Don't. He reached up and gripped Naruto's hand hard, remaining like that for a time. They stood together, slowly regaining their feet and allowing Sasuke to take several deep, shuddering breaths. Naruto nodded, and as soon as he let his hand go, Hinata ducked in and nearly tackled Sasuke with a tight hug. I promise we'll get him, Sasuke, she mumbled. He nodded dully, barely able to lift his arms and return the embrace. Naruto put on his best encouraging smile, reaching over Hinata to place a hand on his shoulder. He still said nothing, but he hoped the action would speak for him. Haku rested a hand on his back, and the four of them stood like that for a long while. Jiraiya and Kakashi remained silent, allowing their students necessary time together. The process of healing was one that would never end, but at least they had each other. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. We're staying with Naruto, Sasuke said flatly from his spot against the wall. I think it's been proven already that it's dangerous for him to be away from the village. Akatsuki won't hesitate even with a Sannin nearby. And you think adding 3 more kids is going to deter them? Jiraiya questioned, raising a dubious eyebrow. I won't deny that all of you are very talented, and you'll make fine Jonin one day, but none of you are even near their level yet. They were prepared to take on me and Naruto in his Kyuubi form, at the same time. 2 kids, Kakashi corrected, nodding towards Haku. I need Haku to assist me back in Konoha. Great. 2 genin then. Kakashi, you know that this is a foolish idea. With all due respect, I believe it to be a wise one. Kakashi looked hard at Jiraiya before gazing around at his 3 original students. They may not be able to take on these threats on their own just yet, but they will always be stronger together than when apart. Don't underestimate my students. Jiraiya thought about arguing, but the other Jonin had one good point at least. Once they were further from Konoha, it would take much longer for help to reach them. They would essentially be alone. Even if they weren't yet fully developed ninja, they were strong in their own right. Fine, the sage huffed, shaking his head and turning for the door. I need to search the rest of the village before it gets too late. We're leaving early tomorrow morning for Tanzaku if I don't find Tsunade here. He was gone before anybody else could get a word out. What are you drawing, Naruto? Hinata asked, peering over his shoulder curiously. Naruto had picked up the brush as soon as Jiraiya had departed, and seemed very intent on his task. He leaned back from the last sheet of paper, which was still entirely blank save for a small seal at its center. Kakashi-sensei gave me an idea, he said proudly. His grin was a tad sheepish as he turned to present the parchment to the room. They all stared blankly at it, not sure what to make of the unexplained symbols. Naruto rolled his eyes and pointed to each part, explaining it as he went. See, the leaf symbol is here in the middle, then these 3 lines of jutsu shiki make a triangle around it, and the spiral connects them all and focuses on the center. It's Team 7, get it? That's surprisingly insightful, Naruto, Kakashi said, the area around his visible eye crinkling in a hidden smirk. Hey, it took me a long time to come up with it. I like it, Hinata put in, and Naruto flashed her an appreciative smile. It's neat, but what's it do? Sasuke asked, still examining the seal. Naruto gave him a cheeky grin and flourished the paper. It lets me move faster than lightning. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.